Apologies, we will start shortly. We're just waiting for the register of interest to come round. We have to complete that before we can start. So we will start shortly. I think we've only got one person left to fill in the register of interests now. So we'll make a start. There's no fire alarm drill anticipated today. So if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building through the nearest fire exit by following the running man signs above the doors and make your way to the rear of the car park. The organizer of the meeting will tell you when it's safe to return. Toilets are available in the stairwell of the building at each floor landing, and water is available from the water cooler in reception. And finally, please make sure phones are muted or switched off, which I've forgotten to do, but I'll crack on anyway. Good morning. I am your chair, Councillor Ollie Davey, and welcome to this Planning Committee meeting on Tuesday, the 10th of June, 2025.
Sorry, I put the wrong date. 15th. It's the 15th of July. Sorry.
Ah, yeah, I didn't even query that because I just don't know what day it is. 15th of July, 2025. To my right is Vice Chair, Councillor Sarah Chamberlain, and supporting officers present today are Wendy Ormsby, Development Manager, Damien Hunter, Planning Solicitor, and Wendy Harris, Democratic Services Officer. Presenting officers for today's applications will be Paul Golding, Jill Himsworth, Sarah Leek-Rose, Liam Fisher, Wendy Ormsby, and Andrew Digby. The meeting today is being streamed live to the Council's YouTube account, so can I remind all members and officers contributing to the meeting to use a microphone, or your comments will not be heard. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members and declarations of interests.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll start with yourself, Councillor Davey.
I am present and I have been lobbied in respect of, I've lost the list now, but lobbied in respect of 25 0007 MOUT, land northeast of King's Garden and Leisure. I've certainly been had objector emails to that. I've been lobbied on application 250711 FUL, Mosshain Farm, and I'm also going to declare an effects and prejudicial NRI at that point. So we're going to have to vote in a new chair and vice chair at some point.
As well. The applicant, isn't it, who you're friends with? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a directly related NRI. Apologies.
Directly related NRI. Yeah. Okay, thank you. We have also, on behalf of the whole committee, I will say, we have all been heavily lobbied on application number 231480 MFUL for the Warren View Sports Ground in Helston Avenue, Exmouth, with a lot of objections to that one. I think that's everything from me, Wendy.
I believe members might have been lobbied on the blanket lobby on 250711. Did members receive emails on that one? Yeah, so I'll do a blanket lobbying declaration for that one as well.
Yeah, and that's been lobbying on behalf of the applicant. Yes. Okay.
Thank you. So, Vice Chair, Councillor Chamberlain.
Sorry, yes, present. Very similarly, I've got to declare, because I know the applicant, 250711 FUL, I believe it's a directly related NRI, so I'll be leaving the chamber. I quite possibly have been lobbied on lots of emails, but unfortunately my email system hasn't been working, so I can't comment any further on that.
Thank you. Councillor Brian Bailey.
Present, Wendy. I've been lobbied on King's Garden Centre site.
Yeah, I've declared that on behalf of all members, Brian, just to keep
and I've also been lobbied on the boxing at Holston Road. And I've also been lobbied on the Mosshain Farm, the temporary building.
I think all of those we can take as blanket.
Thank you.
We've all been lobbied on those. I think you could only declare if you haven't, like Sarah.
Thank you. Councillor Barlow.
President Wendy, and I've been lobbied as others, and also Mike Goodman. I'm aware of Mike Goodman with the last one, the church house in Sidmouth. But again, you know.
We all are. It's come to committee because he's a councillor, so he's obviously known to all of us.
Thank you. Councillor Bloxham.
Present, thank you, Wendy. And again, agenda item 9, 250711 I believe that's a directly related NRI, so I'll leave the room as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Colin Brown.
Declaration of interest only of those that have already been mentioned.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Wendy. Yes, been lobbied the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bethany Collins.
Present, thank you, and nothing to declare other than the usual lobbying.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard.
Present and lobbied, as everybody else has already mentioned. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Howe.
Thank you, present, and yes, been lobbied on all those declared and have had conversations with people regarding Woodbury and Lympston, the item 8.
Item 8, thank you. Councillor Levine.
Present, and I'm taking cover under the blanket. Thank you.
Councillor Ragg. Councillor Ragg.
Couldn't hear you very well. No further declarations.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
You missed me, so nothing to declare.
I'm so sorry, Stuart.
Welcome, Stuart. Actually, I don't think it's your first planning meeting, is it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes. Yeah, yeah.
Apologies,
How
Councillor Hughes.
how could we overlook you, Stuart?
Can I just open up the declarations to non-committee members, please, if you have any declarations?
I've got no declarations.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Paula.
I've
Councillor
got a
Burnley.
declaration for 270711 full, and it said directly relates to NRI. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll just go through a few formalities and then we will need to elect chair and vice chair for certain items. So, registered speakers. The speakers for today's planning applications can be found on pages 4 and 6 of the agenda. Minutes of the previous meetings are on pages 6 to 16 of the agenda. Is it committee's wish that as chair I sign those as a true and accurate record? And that was the meeting held on the 10th of June. Those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? 2. I think, yep.
Before we move on, Chair, can we just ask Councillor Hughes, as he said he didn't have any declarations, but he's actually written one on here. Can we just confirm if that's correct?
Yeah, the same as everybody else, and I think Mike Goodman, that was the other one, because I know him as well.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Sorry. Yeah, I think
that.
we all do. We can take that as blanket, and in fact, it's come to committee because because he's a councillor. I don't think there's any other reason why it would. Okay, we okay with that, Damien? We got the numbers there, all right? Yep. Okay. Apologies, Wendy. Do we have any?
Yes, we do. We've got Councillor Haggerty, Councillor Faithful, and Councillor Smith will be joining us for the afternoon session.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest we've done. Agenda item 5, matters of urgency, there are none. Agenda item 6, to agree any items to be dealt with after the public have been excluded, there are none of those. So before we go on to planning appeal statistics, I will just ask the committee, I would like for the Moss Hayne Farm application, because both Sarah and I have declared an effects, I've forgotten it, thank you, directly related NRI. Councillor Bloxham will do the same, and we will all leave the chamber at that point. So we are going to need a new chair and vice chair for that item. I have asked two councillors who have experience of being, we have two ex-chairs here at least. So I'm going to ask Councillor Mike Howe to chair at that point and Councillor Eileen Wragg to vice chair. Is everyone in favour of doing that? Can I ask those in favour of that appointment? Any dissenters? I don't think so. And any abstentions? I don't think so. Okay, thank you. I'm also going to ask the committee if Sarah Chamberlain has to leave this afternoon, so I will ask Councillor Wragg to vice chair for the afternoon session. So if we could all just vote for or against that, please. Those in favour? And against? And abstentions?
Who's going to have to do the evening session?
I think that's just going to be all of us. We might have to just take turns at chairing. I think I'll have had enough by then. Okay, so right, planning appeal statistics.
Good morning. So not so many appeals have been decided since last committee, just 4. So those of note, so the first one, 24116 OUT, Sandy Way, Kerswell, was an outline application for a self-build dwelling. That appeal was dismissed, the inspector giving weight to the fact of the unsustainable location of the development and also landscape harm. And for those reasons, notwithstanding the tilted balance in favour of delivering housing, the inspector dismissed that appeal. Other of note, so we had the old, so 231785 FUL, the old reservoir, Ridgeway Lane. That appeal was allowed. Again, that was creating a new dwelling, but on the site of a former reservoir that previously did have a prior approval and planning permission for redevelopment for a dwelling. The officers had recommended refusal because of the increased size and scale and landscape impact of the dwelling. The inspector felt that those impacts would be acceptable and gave weight to the fallback position that a dwelling could be erected on the site, and that appeal was allowed. There's a couple of appeals that have been determined since this report was published, and they are listed in the appeals in progress. So the two of note that have been determined are firstly, 240431 MOUT, which is land east of Colstocks Road at Fennerton, outline application for up to 86 dwellings. That was determined via the public inquiry route, and that appeal was allowed. The inspector, I think a lot of you may have read the decision which was circulated earlier this week, but in this instance, the inspector agreed with the council's case that the application was contrary to the spatial strategy of the current local plan, and agreed that the application failed the sequential test due to being located within a critical drainage area. The inspector felt that very little weight could be given to the proposed allocations in the emerging local plan. This was not a proposed allocated site, and part of the council's case was that there were there was an alternative sites within identified in the emerging local plan where it was anticipated that what the council deemed to be the appropriate level of development for Fennerton would be allocated, but the inspector took the view that it was too early to be able to give weight to the fact that those sites would come forward and would actually come forward and ultimately through following the examination of the local plan, bearing in mind we've still got to go through a further Reg 19 consultation process. And ultimately, gave significant weight to applying the tilted balance in favour of housing, acknowledging the council's very low housing, 5-year housing land supply position, and determined that notwithstanding the conflict with the development plan, that applying the tilted balance in this instance, where the inspector considered that the site was sustainably located, that the appeal was allowed. We also had a decision with regard to 231279 MOUT, land adjacent to Hillcrest, Alscombe. Members may remember this was a scheme that came to committee. It was an outline planning application for 20 dwellings, a village hall and a farm shop. And in this instance, Alscombe Village, which has no development boundary, is not deemed to be a sustainable settlement capable of taking development. And the inspector agreed that this was not a sustainable location for development. There would be landscape harm, and notwithstanding the application of the tilted balance in favour of delivering housing, the inspector dismissed the appeal, taking the view that the harm outweighed the benefits in this particular case. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Ormsby. Any questions on those? Councillor Howe.
I mean, it's actually great we've got Mr. Freeman here as well at the same time. With regards to the Fennerton appeal, the appeal inspector seems to indicate that he is happy with our allocations and the extra one he's just allowed, as a cumulative effect on Fennerton is small. In fact, he has a whole paragraph 17, of the 127 we've allocated, plus his 87, brings up to a total of 206, which he believes is fine. Is that my reading? Is that the understanding of we've got our figures wrong for the local plan a little bit? And also, obviously, what we're trying to do is boost our 5-year housing land supply, particularly our affordable housing percentage, which he also makes reference to.
Shall I take that one, Chair? Yes, so thank you, Councillor. I think, in my experience, inspectors are very careful not to answer questions that are not before them. So the acceptability of this site, in addition to the allocations in the local plan, wasn't something for the inspector to consider. So I read the comment at paragraph 17 as quite a neutral sort of observation as to how much a significant increase of 206 over, was it 127, is. It's for us, I think, to decide whether or not we feel that allocating, well, in effect allowing 206 homes to come forward in Fennerton in this plan period is acceptable, and that's something for Strategic Planning Committee to consider. So there's already a resolution from last week's Strategic Planning Committee to bring a report to the September meeting on the other allocated site in Fennerton, the Beechwood site, which is referred to in the decision, otherwise known as Fenny 08 in the local plan. So that site and a number of other sites will be considered in a report to the September meeting in terms of what we do with those sites. And obviously, with reference to this appeal decision, we'll have to ask Strategic Planning Committee to consider whether we wish to continue to include the site in the plan. Obviously, we can make reference to paragraph 17, but I personally read it as a fairly neutral observation rather than a steer that he necessarily felt that 206 homes was acceptable. But ultimately, that's a decision for this council to make as we move forward with the local plan.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Councillor Barlow.
Does this also mean then, having read that we shouldn't be taking much note of our emerging local plan that we have started to take note of as an emerging local plan, seeing as he says that, you know, we've got to go through another section 19 or regulation 19?
Yes, I mean, we're not giving significant weight to the emerging local plan at this point anyway. I think this appeal decision serves as a caution to not do so and to continue to not give significant weight to it, particularly as the inspector draws attention to the fact that if there's going to be a second round of Regulation 19 consultation, which we know there is, then you can't have any certainty that what's in the first Regulation 19 consultation will be what goes in the plan that's submitted for examination. As I advised Strategic Planning Committee last week, though, we need to be very careful that we don't make significant changes to the plan, because the guidance in the National Planning Policy Framework is very clear. Now, having had a recent update, that if in a second round of Regulation 19 consultation we do make significant changes to the plan, then it could be read that actually that's the date of that consultation that's taken as the Reg 19 consultation for the transitional arrangements, at which point we wouldn't fall into those transitional arrangements, and we would have to meet the higher housing requirement figure that's now in the government's standard method, which is basically 25% higher than the figure we've been planning for. So essentially we'd have to rip up the local plan and start again. So we need to be very careful. I would suggest that Strategic Planning Committee, in terms of making changes to the plan. But I think what this decision shows is that we're in the gap basically between plans. We've got the adopted local plan that unfortunately can't carry as much weight as we would like because it's out of date and we don't have a 5-year housing land supply. And then we've got a new plan coming through, but it's not at a point where we can give substantial weight to it. So unfortunately, we're in a window where we're going to struggle to give weight to the policies and the strategy in the plan. But hopefully we will quickly move the Regulation 19 plan forward to the second Regulation 19 consultation, and then we can start to give more weight to it.
And I can see your trigger finger hovering.
Sorry, Chair, I just one final thing is, can you just bring us up to date with exactly where our 5-year housing supply is at the present time?
Well, the last monitoring report showed 2.97 years supply, so quite substantially short of the 5-year requirement. That is primarily, well, partly because that at the moment needs to be assessed against the new standard method figure, the higher one, not the one that we're planning to in terms of the Reg 19 plan, because until that plan's adopted, we can't actually do the calculations to that figure. It's to that higher figure. So that is driving the 5-year housing land supply figure down. Having said that, even if we use the lower figure, we'd still be short of 5, just not as far short as we are.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we can move on then to agenda item 8, planning application 25/007 MOUT, land northeast of King's Garden and Leisure, Hullam Road, Exmouth, which I think we passed today on the way here. Pages 30 to 94 in your agenda, and it's over to Principal Planning Officer Paul Golding to present the report on this one.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. Just like to start the presentation off with some updates. We've received some recent correspondence, which I believe, one of which from South West Water was circulated to members yesterday afternoon. But for those who haven't had a chance to read it, and obviously people at the committee, I'm going to read it out in full first. So the letter says, South West Water is currently investing 38 million in Exmouth to do everything we can to protect the environment, which includes upgrading our pumping stations and treatment works to significantly reduce the number of sewage spills. This investment also includes sewer replacement, surface water management, increasing treatment capacity, and upgrading the sewage treatment outlet pipe. During the project's design process, we always include an assessment of future growth, taken from the local plan provision to ensure that our investments are future-proofed. The undertaker has recently been undertaking works at Mare Road Pumping Station on a complex area of the network that required us to use additional tankers to complete the work. This including the need to tanker overnight on the 8th of July 2025, which ensured that there were no sewage spills to environment. Temporary arrangements are now in place whilst we complete the planned activities, but we are no longer using tankers. South West Water, as statutory water and sewerage undertaker for East Devon, concluded an initial desktop assessment to assess potential high-level risks relating to the proposed development at Hullam Road. This initial high-level assessment gave indication that the foul flows from the proposed development had the potential to cause impact on the localised sewer network. The indicated potential impact related to capacity within the local sewer network, whereas no capacity concerns were highlighted relating to the Mare Lane wastewater treatment works as a result of the proposed development. Based on this information, the undertaker submitted comments to inform the local planning authority of the potential risks and indicate a timeline in the event that works were required. Due to the use of combined sewers within the area, an effective method of increasing capacity within the local network includes the implementation of surface water separation schemes. Subsequently, South West Water conducted a more detailed evaluation of its infrastructure and the potential impacts of the proposal, including through the use of a hydraulic modelling assessment. And as a result of these further evaluations, the undertaker identified that there is sufficient capacity within the local network and treatment infrastructure to accommodate solely the foul flows from the proposed development without a need for further works. This assessment included consideration of the proposal in isolation, as well as in combination with other in-progress and approved developments. In light of the evidence within this more detailed assessment, the undertaker submitted to the council that the previously indicated Grampian condition would not be necessary in this instance. However, the undertaker strongly supports the imposition of a condition to require formal approval of the applicant's final foul drainage details to ensure that this aspect and the potential risks are adequately managed within the planning system. The undertaker's position is based on foul-only flows entering into the public sewer system and cannot accept any surface water from the proposed development entering into the public network. South West Water in principle support the applicant's proposed surface water drainage strategy, adhering to the surface water disposal hierarchy by discharging to ground and then to a watercourse. The undertaker supports the imposition of a condition requiring the submission of the applicant's final surface water drainage details to ensure flood risk on and off-site is sufficiently managed. And in terms of the provision of a drinkable water supply, the undertaker confirms that its network has sufficient capacity to accommodate the proposed development. However, the undertaker would strongly support the council in imposing a suitable condition to secure water efficiency measures in relation to the development. With continuing climate change trends, our national water resources continue to be placed under increased pressure. By requiring the enhanced 110 litres per person day average water consumption standard by planning condition, the impacts of the proposed development can be minimised. The undertaker submitted a joint statement signed by South West Water and the Environment Agency stating evidence to support the council, highlighting why the use of water conservation condition is relevant and necessary to manage impacts of the development within the South West. We've also received a very late representation from the Devon and Cornwall Police, who request to secure a financial contribution to fund additional police infrastructure. And they've requested that secured through Section 106. Specifically, the police request cost of additional personnel infrastructure attributed to the development of £2,764.49, and the cost of new police vehicles required as a result of the development being £599.06. So a total developer contribution of £3,363.55 is being sought from Devon and Cornwall Police to mitigate the impacts of the development will have on the police resources and to ensure that police can continue to provide the same level of service to the new and existing residents in Exmouth. Obviously, we've had this at a very late stage, and we haven't really been able to consider the request in significant detail. So we officers are asking basically if committee are minded to approve the application, requesting delegated powers to determine whether the requested contributions meets the test set out within the SIL regulations. And if concluded that it does, then it can be added to the heads of terms for the Section 106. We've also received a letter of objection, which I believe has been circulated to members from the North East Residents Action Group. I believe a representative from the group is here to speak today. And we've received a further letter from PCL Planning on behalf of their clients Waddington Park in relation to the proposed access onto Hullam Road, raising concerns about it being used only as an emergency emergency access and not for pedestrians and cyclists. So that's it in terms of the updates. So turning to the applications, an outline application seeking approval for access only with matters of layout, scale, appearance and landscaping reserved for residential development comprising up to 75 dwellings, the formation of vehicular and pedestrian access from the adjoining Goodmoors development site, public open space and other associated infrastructure. This application is before committee because it represents a departure from the adopted local plan, and a contrary view has been expressed by the ward member, town council and parish council. So the application itself is comprised of an agricultural field, which is approximately 4.3 hectares in area on the northern fringes of Exmouth. Is my pointer working? Should be, sorry, just trying to get the pointer here. Yeah. So the southwestern boundary of the site adjoins the northeastern boundary of the Goodmoors site, which is currently delivering 300 dwellings, commercial employment land, and includes land reserved for a primary school, community football pitch, and an equipped area of children's play. The application site is currently undeveloped and comprises a gently sloping field of neutral grassland, which is bound by native hedgerow and mature lines of trees. It also contains 2 individual veteran trees and a number of mature trees, which are the subject of a tree preservation order. And there's a small area of mixed scrub surrounding an artificial badger set in the southern corner of the field. And this bottom slide on the right here sets out the site constraints and shows that the site is located outside of an existing built-up area boundary of Exmouth, as defined by the adopted local plan and the Exmouth neighbourhood plan, and therefore it is in countryside. The site isn't the subject of any national or local landscape designations. The national landscape boundary and the Pebblebed Heaths boundary is around 950 metres from the site, and the site itself falls within an area which is designated as flood zone 1 with a low risk of flooding. The entire site constitutes grade 3 agricultural land, and there are 9 TPO protected oak trees around the site which are to be retained. So the site is not allocated for development under the adopted local plan, but officers note that the Strategic Planning Committee resolved to allocate the site for 59 dwellings as part of the emerging local plan. However, as has been discussed earlier, due to its early stages, officers caution the amount of weight that should be afforded to the emerging allocation, but note that it does perhaps indicate the direction of travel for additional housing in this part of Exmouth. So the site benefits from an existing agricultural access off of Hullam Road to the northwest, and King's Garden Leisure and Goodmoors site adjoins the south western boundary. There's a residential property, Coles, which is a large residential dwelling adjoining the northeastern boundary, and agricultural land adjoining to the south and the east. Now, this slide's been included because it shows a plan of the Goodmoors approved scheme for 300 residential units, and the application site itself is just located to the northeast in the context of Goodmoors. Members will note that the internal access road through Goodmoors, from which the development would be accessed onto Deanham Way. So the application seeks approval for access, and the development is proposed to be accessed from the adjacent Goodmoors site currently under construction. And these photos show the vehicular access where the estate road joins onto Deanham Way. No changes are proposed to this access, which is displayed with good visibility in both directions and include pedestrian crossing points. And these photos here show the existing agricultural access onto the site from Hullam Road, which at this point is subject to a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit. And the proposal intends to utilise this access as an emergency access only. And officer suggestions to open it up to pedestrian and cycle access have been discounted by the applicants due to concerns over highway safety. And these photos show that the site does have restricted visibility onto Hullam Road in both directions, and that there's no footways along the road in either direction, and there's no street lights. So whilst the use of the access for cyclists could be desirable, given the fact that it leads onto Hullam Road, which is fast and a fairly heavily trafficked section of road, which doesn't provide any additional connectivity to services and facilities on other housing developments, the highway safety concerns raised by the applicant in respect to the use of this access appear justified. And officers don't consider that the lack of this link will result in an unsustainable development or a development that doesn't maximise opportunities for sustainable travel beyond that of the private car. As this slide shows the relationship between the application site and the adjoining proposed housing allocation land at Marley Drive, which is Exmouth 04 in the emerging local plan, which has been allocated for around 50 dwellings. And there is a policy requirement within the emerging allocation for the application site to provide pedestrian and cycle access into the adjoining site. And whilst the emerging policy carries little weight at this stage, officers have sought to ensure that this outline application does indicatively show where the proposed access points could be provided in the event that these sites do come forward in the new local plan as housing allocations. So these are shown here in purple. In addition to these pedestrian and cycle links into Exmo 04, the highway and pedestrian link into Goodmoors itself would promote connectivity and improve permeability of the development, linking through to other residential schemes. So the application is supported by a constraints and opportunities plan that has been the subject of much officer discussion with the council's ecologist and the tree officer. And this constraints and opportunities plan has been prepared to inform the quantum of development based on ensuring boundary, trees and hedgerows are safeguarded and retained within public communal ownership and not within individual plots. And members will note that from this slide that the constraints of the site include the provision of a 10-metre wide buffer zones along the site's southwest, southeast and northeast boundaries and through the centre of the site. And 5-metre dark corridors are proposed along the remaining boundary. The provision of 15-metre buffer zones around the 2 veteran trees within the site, which is highlighted by the red shading here and here. And adequate buffer zones around the artificial badger set that has been constructed in the southern corner of the site as compensatory measures for the impacts of development on the adjacent Goodmoors site. The council's ecologist supports the principle of this, but has advised that the devil will be in the detail on how the areas will be designed. As this is an outline application, it is the parameters of these measures that need to be secured, and specific impacts on ecological features of the site and the trees will be assessed at reserve matters stage when a layout is submitted. So this slide shows an indicative site layout plan requested by officers to demonstrate that the quantum of development of up to 75 dwellings, the internal access roads, open space and SUDS features can be provided on the site, whilst being informed by the constraints and opportunities plan shown on the previous slide and the ecological and our constraints that it's presented. And whilst this plan is indicative only, officers consider that it does demonstrate that up to 75 dwellings could be provided without compromising the constraints identified in a form and layout that would be appropriate for the size, shape and configuration of the site and its rural character. And the master plan also shows how the vehicular access would be taken from the adjoining Goodmoors development and down into Deanham Way with future pedestrian and cycle links. This is another indicative layout plan, again demonstrating that housing layout could be provided with good amounts of informal and formal open space, garden sizes and SUDs. Retention of the trees and the vegetation around the site's boundaries and additional planting will be an important part of the scheme. But these will be considered and reviewed as part of any reserve matters application. So in respect of the trees on the site, significant local concern has been raised about whether they have been appropriately categorised as veteran trees and whether sufficient buffers have been provided in line with the policy requirements of the NPPF. The council's tree officer accepts that there are 2 veteran trees within the site which have been correctly identified by the applicant and that there are a number of other notable trees within the site which at this moment are not significant enough or display sufficient features to distinguish them from other mature or notable trees within the site. And this slide here identifies oak trees 78 and 93 within the site as being the veteran trees, which are afforded a high level of protection within the NPPF, noting that paragraph 193 of the NPPF stated that development that results in the loss or deterioration of irreplaceable habitats, which does include veteran trees, should be refused unless there are wholly exceptional reasons and a suitable compensatory strategy exists. And this slide also highlights a number of other notable trees within the site which have significant amenity value. And the slide shows the contribution that the trees within the site as a wider perspective makes to the visual amenity and character and appearance of the area. And whilst the trees are a clear constraint on the site, it's important to recognise that this is an outline application where matters of layout are reserved for future consideration. So this slide shows the indicative site plan, which shows that how the veteran trees could be that have been identified could be accommodated within the areas of open space, with appropriate buffers provided in line with the NPPF requirements. And then this also shows the revised constraints and opportunities plan, allowing for a 10-metre ecological corridor on the southeast and western sides of the site, and which would allow additional clearance of private gardens from retained trees, reducing the likelihood of future pressure from residents. As has been highlighted within the officer report, there is a tension between considering an outline application where the detail provided is indicative. However, this constraints plan and the veteran trees have been considered by the council's tree officer, who's advised that in principle there's no objection to an outline application or the quantum of development that's been proposed. So the entire site is within flood zone 1 and is therefore at low risk of flooding. And in relation to the surface water runoff, a flood risk assessment has been submitted as part of the application, which includes a surface water drainage strategy. The intention is for all runoff from impermeable areas to be conveyed by surface water drains into adoptable on-site surface water sewers or grass swales, which then discharge into 2 on-site SUDS attenuation ponds, which will have restricted runoff rates and an outfall to a small watercourse to the south. And then the remaining slides shows kind of a view from the existing agricultural access into the site from Hullam Road. There's a view back towards the western boundary with Goodmoors in the background behind the tree line. This is a view from within the site looking southwest. And views along the northeastern boundary along here. And this is a view of the site from within the northeastern corner. So you can pretty much see the whole site from this slide. And here's a view along the northwestern boundary. You can see the notable trees within the site. And this slide shows where the proposed access will be from the adjoining Goodmoors development. And this is a view of the site from outside of the site, from the top of Deanham Way and Hullam Road junction, which shows the site in the wider views in the context of Goodmoors, and there's King's Garden Garden Centre here. So turning to the issues that obviously are raised for this application, it is a requirement of planning law that decisions are determined in accordance with the development plan unless material planning considerations indicate otherwise. In this case, officers consider the presumption in favour of sustainable development as set out in paragraph 11D of the NPPF is triggered as the council is unable to demonstrate that there's a 5-year supply of deliverable housing land. This site is not allocated for development and it is in the open countryside and would therefore be contrary to strategy 1 and 7 of the adopted local plan and the made Exmouth neighbourhood plan. A decision to approve the application would be done so as a departure from the local plan and its spatial strategy for housing. A material consideration in the decision of this application is the need to bolster housing supply and especially affordable housing. And this proposal will result in the provision of additional housing in Exmouth, which officers advise should be given significant weight in the decision. The proposal would provide 25% affordable housing, which whilst not strictly policy compliant, meets the requirements of strategy 34 because of the council's position in relation to housing land supply, and where built up area boundaries and policies of housing restraint no longer carry any weight. And whilst the site lies outside of any built up area boundary, it does adjoin the built up area boundary of Exmouth, which is the district's largest town, which is in itself provides a wealth of employment, leisure, retail, community and public transport facilities expected for a town of this size. Concerns about the site's location on the northern fringes of Exmouth, approximately 3 kilometres from the town centre, are acknowledged. However, the proposal is within 600 metres of a number of local facilities and a neighbourhood centre, and also within walking distance of a bus stop, will be readily accessible to residents of the new development, which are accessed via the link through the Goodmoors site to Dinham Way. Connectivity between the site and Goodmoors and other sites that may come forward through future local plan allocations are considered to be key to ensuring the site maximises sustainable modes of travel and connectivity. The site is not considered to be any less sustainable than Goodmoors or residential development to the south of Exmouth, and sites do need to be found on the edge of settlements to meet current and future housing need. This site benefits from the fact that it is not constrained by landscape designations, and it is sufficiently distanced from the Pebblebed Heaths, which weighs in favour of the proposal in terms of the principle. The application has been submitted in outline for up to 75 residential units, and the indicative site layout plan has been informed by the ecological and harbour constraints of the site. And the opinion of officers does demonstrate that 75 dwellings could be accommodated in a form and layout that would be appropriate for the site and its rural character. The indicative site layout plan demonstrates that housing layouts could be provided with good amounts of informal and formal open space, garden sizes, whilst retaining these important ecological features. The landscape and visual impacts of proposals are likely to be limited to the site and the local area. The site is considered to be well contained, and it's considered that development could be accommodated without a significant adverse impact to the wider landscape character. The application has been carefully considered by the council's tree officer, who is satisfied that the applicant has demonstrated that veteran trees on the site can be appropriately protected from detrimental impact and harm in line with paragraph 193 of the NPPF. Any future reserve matters application would still require the applicant to demonstrate that the trees will be provided with an unencroached buffer zone befitting a veteran specimen to ensure that the proposed works do not have a detrimental impact on the longevity of the trees, or indeed any other protected trees on the site. The application has a number of associated benefits, including housing delivery and the provision of affordable homes and public open space, which are given weight in the decision. The proposal would also include economic benefits from construction to operation and benefits to local businesses and services, as well as SIL payments, of which a proportion would go to the town and parish councils. These are all considered to be benefits of the development which align with the NPPF's overarching objectives. So the proposal has been assessed in relation to design, highways, trees, ecology, sustainability and amenity, and officers conclude that the proposal would not result in any significant harm. The proposal would result in biodiversity gain loss of 60%, and so it would not be possible to achieve the mandatory 10% increase in biodiversity on site. Therefore, off-site habitat units to achieve BNG will be required to be legally secured via a planning obligation. A condition is recommended to secure the on-site BNG and ecological measures and for a biodiversity gain plan to be prepared in accordance with the ecological impact assessment. The proposal has been reviewed by the EA, Devon County Council, Flood Risk and South West Water with no objections in principle raised in respect to foul and surface water drainage. And detailed surface and foul drainage schemes are also the subject of conditions. So there's clearly a need to balance development within the countryside against the need for housing within the district and to justify a departure from the adopted local plan. The material considerations must clearly indicate otherwise and outweigh the harm. In view of officers having regard to all the planning issues set out within the committee report and this presentation, given the need to bolster housing supply for the longer term, the sustainable location of the site and the level of affordable housing proposed, the material considerations in this case would on balance justify a departure from the adopted local plan, and that the proposed development would overall align with the principles of sustainable development. It is therefore recommended that the appropriate assessment is adopted and the application be approved, subject to Section 106 legal agreement and the conditions set out within the officer report, which have been summarised on the slide above. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. I've got speakers first before we go to questions.
It's not questions, declaration. I'm a friend of the family for King's Garden Leisure, which is next door, but I've done this before with another one we've done there, and it wasn't a problem, but I thought I ought to mention.
No, I think Damien would say they haven't put in an objection or anything. They haven't suggested they'd be affected.
Just an effects NRI then if you don't think you're prejudiced.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for declaring that, though. Okay, we'll move on to objectors. So we'll, Andy Roberts. And we have a lot of applications today, so I'm going to be fairly tight on the 3-minute window that you have. So thank you.
Good morning, councillors. I'm objecting to this application for several reasons, but the key ones I would reiterate today are, firstly, the development is outside the settlement boundary, and I see no reason why you should accept less than a 50% affordable housing. EDDC state that there is a shortage of affordable housing, but consistently ignore their own policy on percentage levels. The developer has given no indication that there is a viability issue, and given the proximity of their existing Goodmoors site, easier terrain and existing site mobilisation, it's difficult to see why EDDC would accept half of their own policy target. Secondly, contrary to what the officer has said, I believe that it's an excessive number of dwellings. The 75 dwellings is clearly a gross overdevelopment. EDD's assessment for the local plan was 59 dwellings, i.e. 25% less. This is a rural setting. It certainly is not an urban setting. It will be if it has 75 houses, but you've seen the pictures. They're quite very rural setting. The negative impact, the negative BNG of -66%, -66% is indicative that the development is too dense, resulting in an unacceptable impact on the environment and landscape. Thirdly, there are a number of access issues. Firstly, with Deanon Way, there will be significant traffic flow problems with this development feeding into Deanon Way. There's traffic from this development, from the existing Goodmoors development, from the Aldi store, from the proposed primary school. And so it's difficult to see how this junction will cope without modification. It's essential that a Section 106 agreement is in place to fund that and the current and future requirements at this junction. Secondly, the access onto Hullam Road, and here I'm in full agreement with the developer. Access onto Hullam Road should be for emergency vehicles only. This is backed up by comments by Devon Highways, and no access for pedestrians or cyclists should be given at this dangerous location. And thirdly, the access to the adjacent site, 25007, the land off Marley Road, which I think you've touched on. The site plans for this development showed 2 pedestrian and cycle access points into the adjacent site. If you look at the plan from the other developer on 25078, these are accesses directly into the gardens of houses that are built backing onto those 2 boundaries. And when you look at their plan, they have one access which is for pedestrians only, no cycle access, at a completely different point. In fact, I think it's almost directly into the Badger set, but it's on the old Goodmoors site. So finally, even if the planning committee is minded to approve this development in the future, it should reject the current application, not just approve subject to conditions, until the developer increases the affordable housing to policy level of 50%, reduces the number of dwellings to 59 or less to have an acceptable landscape impact, agrees to fund any requirement improvements onto Deanon Way, sorts out the access between this site and 25078.
I need to ask you to wind up there, Andy. We're half a minute over.
Right. With a meaningful legal agreement and no access to be granted onto Hullam Road. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the agent, Simon Collier.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I am Simon Collier of Collier Planning, and I am speaking on behalf of the applicants. The application site adjoins the current local plan's mixed-use allocated site at Goodmoors, which is currently being built out. Vehicular and pedestrian access into the proposed development, which is the only detailed matter proposed at this outline stage, will be provided from Goodmoors, and the proposals will therefore be within easy walking and cycling distance, both of the commercial and community uses proposed within the wider development and the existing bus services available on Deanon Way to the south. As the officer report explains, the application site is proposed to be allocated for housing within the new draft local plan, and so has already been assessed by the council as being a suitable site to meet the housing needs of the area. The benefits of the proposals will include the provision of up to 75 dwellings in a sustainable location to help boost housing supply, the provision of 25% of the houses as affordable housing to help meet a clearly identified local need, economic benefits and job creation associated with the construction and investment in the area, a high-quality development and substantial areas of well-designed and maintained public open space and green infrastructure, and 10% biodiversity net gain, with the intention for it to be provided on nearby land within the same ownership. A full range of technical assessments of the site and its surrounding area has been undertaken and has informed the outline planning application. As the report makes clear, the applicants have also worked extensively with your ecology, tree and landscape officers, as well as the case officer, to ensure that the indicative layout demonstrates that the scale of housing proposed can be delivered while responding positively to their requirements and the constraints and opportunities of the site. Indeed, the report confirms that there are no objections to the application from any statutory consultees. And South West Water has also recently confirmed and evidenced that there is capacity in the foul drainage system for the proposed development and that they are able to fulfil their statutory obligations. It is also the case that new housing will provide additional funding to improve drainage infrastructure in the area. We therefore request your support for the very clear officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And coming in on time there. Ward members, Councillor Jeff Young.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak today. I'm wearing two hats today, one as ward member, as the site straddles both Exmouth Town and Woodbury and Lympstone Ward. I'm also wearing my environmental operations hat as the additional increase in sewage demand from that housing estate may have an effect on the wider area as a negative impact. Other speakers have covered their concerns, so I'll just cover my portfolio concern. There is confusion on whether this application will have on the Exmouth sewage infrastructure. South West Water tell us the original response of requiring 18 months delay before occupation was to give a more time to understand the hydraulic modelling for the proposed development. However, that has now been completed, and their modelling has confirmed that the existing wastewater system should be able to accommodate the foul water flows from this development of 75 dwellings within the public network. But, and that's a big but I'm concerned with their wording. The word should and foul water only flows. I'm also worried that their report only reviews the first 216 metres from the connection point of this new housing estate so 200 metres basically down the road. There is another 3 miles of network of pipes, pumps and storage tanks between there and the sewage works. This considerable 3-mile distance of infrastructure to the sewage system are well known to us, as we have all been made aware of the various problems over the last couple of years, with Exmouth appearing on national TV more than once as a sewage in the sea hotspot. South West Water acknowledge, and I quote from an email I received from them on Friday, that the wastewater system in this area still needs investment, and there are planned investment works for this catchment to be completed before 2030. However, that's 4.5 years away. We also know that the Mere Lane sewage works expansion will start in around 2030, following their land purchase, following detailed design and successful planning approval. But pollution is not only our concern. I'm also aware of housing requirements set by central government, that we are required to provide extra housing for the housing emergency. So how do we, as a planning authority, justify supporting this application within the Exmouth catchment area with the clear knowledge there are similar areas in East Devon that need foul sewage investment urgently too? Basically, what comes first, the improved sewage infrastructure or the requirement to build more housing, or is there another alternative to this dilemma? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. We also have a statement from Councillor Benningham, the other ward member, and Wendy, you're going to read that one out.
So Councillor Ingham recommends the application for refusal for the following reasons. The site of this application is an ancient meadow, picturesque and of great value to the natural environment. It is in the open countryside. It is outside of the built-up area boundary. It has appalling connectivity to public transport. Its location to the north of Exmouth promotes commuting instead of reducing it. This will increase flooding to the Watton Brook and its floodplain. Reassurances from South West Water are hard to believe based on recent testaments. This is a very weak location for affordable or social housing with a strong reliance on public transport that is unsafe to access. In summing up, Councillor Ingham believes there are many far better sites identical to promote affordable housing, which is claimed as the deciding factor. But this is not good enough. That's what he says.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we can go to questions for officers. Councillor Gazzard.
Thank you, Chair. Question to the officer. I am concerned that, as we all know, that we are desperate for affordable housing in Exmouth. And here we are again, recommended 25%. Can you give me a good reason why we're not going for 50%, please?
Yeah, so because obviously it has been well documented, the council isn't able to demonstrate having a 5-year housing land supply. Policies that relate to built-up area boundaries in the local plan and those that relate to housing restraint carry a lot less weight. So effectively, when we're looking at this application, the built-up area boundary isn't there, so we can't insist on the 50% that would normally be required through Strategy 34 of the local plan. So 25% would be the affordable housing amount that we would secure for housing within the built-up area boundary. But because that boundary doesn't carry any weight, that's the position we've reached.
Okay, Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. The amount the police are asking, £3,500. I mean, is that worth their big long letter and you then having to check it and all the rest of it? It just seems a very small amount for an awful lot of hassle that we'll no doubt have to go through. And also the 106 recommendations from South West Water about saving water, is that something we would be conditioning now, or is that going to come later on? And would that include water butts, seeing as we're there?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it is a relatively small amount in terms of the police request. I think officers need to carefully consider whether it meets the test set out in SIL Regulation 122 in terms of whether the request is necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, whether it's directly related to the development, and whether it's fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind as well. So I think that's why I said at the start when I was reading out there, I think we'd like to, if members are minded to approve the application, delegated authority to consider that in further detail, given the length of time we've actually had that request in.
And can we just refuse it if we don't think that's a reasonable waste of your time? I mean, amount of your time to be used doing it?
No, I don't think that would be a reasonable reason to refuse the application.
I think perhaps what they're trying to do is establish the principle, because to my knowledge, that's the first one of this kind that we've had. So I've got Brian and Maddie. Okay, councillor Howe. Sorry, Paul, you had another question.
So in respect of your question about water conservation and water supply, yes, there are, officers do recommend additional conditions that would secure that at outline stage. So that would be for the submission of a water conservation strategy, which has been highlighted by South West Water, and also a further condition that requires all works necessary to improve the public water distribution network to be completed and confirmed in writing by the LPA. Prior to any building being occupied or brought into use.
Okay, councillor Howe.
Thank you. Coming back to the affordable housing element, and I'm thinking of the Fennerton decision last week, where that was adjacent to a built-up area boundary, but the appeal inspector, I believe, and I'm saying that word carefully because I've had so much reading, I'm losing everything at this minute in time, imposed 50% affordable housing. So what's the difference here to there? Because they both seem to be qualify exactly what Councillor Golding has, Mr. Golding just said.
I'll come back on that one. So within if you had an application within Fennerton itself, the requirement would be for 50% affordable housing. It's not one of the settlements to which the 25% policy applies. At least that's my understanding. We'll just quickly check. I think there's just a few of it's the larger settlements which we require 25% and elsewhere 50%. Yeah, that's correct. So if it was within Fennerton, it would be 50%. Therefore, the fact that it's adjoining, it's also 50%.
Okay, thank you. Good question. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite concerned about the highways reply to us, or they consider that the junctions as they stand are going to be capable of handling all the extra traffic, and they feel that there's no need for a 106 to put money in, for example, road improvements, traffic lights, for example. Now, we know that the new road is coming from Limpstone right up through there. It's going to join Hullen Road at the top. Within 200 metres, this is where this development will come out, and all the traffic from Goodmoors. And I feel that they've not assessed, because from personal experience, which I'm sure you're familiar with, living in that area, the traffic flow is very significant at the moment. And when that new road opens, and if the little store opens on that site, which has been applied for, the traffic density is going to be considerably more. And I don't believe that their plan is just to we'll let it sort itself out sort of attitude. It is not sufficient for us, and I can't accept it, to be honest with you, Chair. Thank you.
I think it's Aldi, not Lidl. Lidl's at the other end. Yeah. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. I have 3 questions. The first one, 11 years ago, the residents asked a number of independent associations to do reports on this field. Natural England being one, bats conservation, wildlife, the plants that were growing, all the fauna, the ponds, everything. I'm a bit concerned that after these reports have been given to the planning department of this council, that my colleagues have not seen a copy of any of these reports. I'm sure Mr. Freeman knows what I'm talking about. I also haven't heard anything from Clinton Devon Estates, who are having trouble up on the common containing the springs up there. So I would like to know what was happening, because last time I spoke to Clinton Devon, which was last month, they were working on that. Goodmoors Farm has 2 holding tanks, and now we're told the site behind is going to have 2 holding tanks. Is this normal for 2 building sites in such close proximity to have 4 holding tanks for water? I find this very disturbing. Those are my 3 questions, Chair.
In respect of the ecology questions, the application is accompanied by an ecological impact assessment, which follows published survey guidelines, and any limitations have been explained, and that's been carefully considered by the council's ecologist, who raises no objections to the development in terms of the impact on protected species. So officers see no reason that this application could be refused on ecological grounds, especially considering the conditions that have been imposed or suggested by officers that are detailed in the report. In respect of the SUDs, I assume you're referring to the SUDs. Obviously, this development needs to mitigate the impact of surface water runoff on its own. So a sustainable drainage system has been proposed to mimic the existing drainage regime as closely as possible and to minimise the impact of new development. And that is fairly standard practice for the development to be served by its own SUDs and attenuation features.
Yes.
But I don't understand if the council's ecology officer is happy why independent reports from different organisations cannot be shown to councillors. I fail to see what the problem is.
I presume those reports were done some time ago, Maddie.
I don't think the countryside changes that much, Chair, sorry.
No, but normally we would ask, we won't accept ecology assessments that are fairly old. So actually, we would require a more up-to-date ecology assessment rather than rely.
Chair, a 100-year-old tree is a 100-year-old tree.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that, and I'm
You know, but
quite
I
sure
don't-
I
I
know
don't
as
see
much
why
about the
not.
countryside as you do, Maddie. My point is that normally we rely on an up-to-date ecological assessment, and the officer has concluded there is I think it was quoted 60, I think it's 60 in my report, a 60% loss of biodiversity, but they are satisfied that that can be provided off-site. But yes, that is something to weigh up. Can we sustain that amount of loss of biodiversity in the area when there's no guarantee that the off-site contribution would be anywhere near the area, might not even be in the same county?
Just to further clarify, all information, whether it's been provided by the applicants or whether it's been information that's been submitted by third parties in respect of this application, has been made available on the website. So there are no reports that have been submitted to us in relation to this application that have been withheld and not published. So just wanting to make that clear. And also just furthering the point about the SUDS attenuation ponds, the two that you raised, and you're commenting about there's two further on the neighbouring site. That is following best practice. So attenuation ponds are the best way, the first and most preferred way of dealing with surface water drainage on site. So it's certainly something that we would regularly see on developments and would not be something that would be raising concern. So in terms of you were asking if it is normal, and the answer is yes, it is. Thank you.
The third question from Clinton Springs, because there are underground springs in the area, and one of the springs goes right up through this site.
I'm assuming the blue lines we saw going through the development are the springs you're referring to. I know there are springs there because quite often they come out onto the road as well.
Chair, according to Clinton Devon, sometimes they branch off the underground springs with the pressure, which is what they're trying to control up on the common.
Okay. Paul, any
comment on that?
Sorry, Chair, just looking at the hydrology. I mean, the hydrology of the site has been considered by the lead local authority, Devon County Council, and they raise no specific concerns in terms of the principle of whether a suitable SUD surface water drainage scheme could be secured on the site. So I'm not sure it's something that we could really take into account, but it would be something that would be considered if it is part of the hydrology of the site through a condition that requires the submission of a surface water management plan that would be considered by in detail by the lead local flood authority.
Okay, Councillor Howe. Okay, Councillor Wragg.
Thank you. I'd like to ask about the access. From what I've read, the only way of preventing access onto Hallam Road is supposed to be an emergency access only. The only way of making that possible is by putting up signs. Now, residents, future residents of this development, if they live further away from the Dinan Way entrance, will be tempted to use that emergency access, human nature. Is there anything that can prevent that, apart from signs and relying on the goodwill of people?
Yeah, I believe it is a locked gate that's proposed. But members will note one of the conditions that's been recommended by officers is actually when the reserve matters for layout comes in, that includes detailed plans and a specification for the emergency vehicle access into the development site. So we would expect that to provide the sufficient level of detail to show how that's going to be used only for emergency vehicular access.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite concerned about this, and we're going to have to look very closely at that when it comes through, because Hallam Road, as you know, we drove up it today, is a very fast stretch of road, and there've been a number of fatalities over the years. It's a horrible road to drive, actually.
Yeah, I agree. That particular stretch is not attractive at all. Okay. Yes, Councillor Howe.
Thank you. I want to pick up a point that Councillor Young was making. South West Water and our council statement that we have no faith in South West Water. Ofwat's report last week, which basically said something very similar, not quite, but very close to it, that they have no faith in South West Water. In South West Water coughed up 24 million to kind of say, yes, we're not very good at doing things. So my question is, with all the facts we know about Exmouth and the sewage overflows into the sea in particular, that has been increasing over year, how we can stand that with South West Water's response of putting more sewage into the same system isn't going to increase the overflows out to sea. Because to me, it is an absolute contradiction in terms. And consequently, if we agree that we're going to put more sewage into the sea at Exmouth, how can we prevent that with a Grampian condition that actually has some teeth or something else to stop that happening until we are satisfied that South West Water have actually done the work they have to do?
If I may, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I understand members' concerns and obviously the lack of trust in South West Water. We had, as officers, a meeting with them yesterday, which is the statement that Paul read out, came out of that to try and understand their views on this application a bit better and to understand them in the wider context of what we're seeing on the ground in Exmouth at the moment in terms of overflows, tankering of wastewater out of the town, and these sorts of issues, because I fully understand why members and the community feel that there's a contradiction perhaps between their comments on this application and what they're seeing on the ground. I think one of the challenges we have is obviously this process, the process of dealing with a planning application is largely evidence-based, And the evidence we have in this case is the evidence from South West Water. We don't necessarily have contradictory evidence from professionals other than what we see on the ground in terms of what's happening. And obviously, we don't know what the situation might be like ourselves in terms of when this development would actually come forward, which is what South West Water are looking at rather than the current situation. They have their plans for investment in the town. They've invested millions in the town in terms of improving the infrastructure there. Excuse me. The work we have been doing through consultants, through the water cycle study, as members will be aware, is taking an awful lot longer than we envisaged. And unfortunately, we still don't have a final report. But I can say that that emerging work does show that there is some capacity at the Mare Lane sewage treatment works. So I have no reason to question what South West Water is saying in terms of the capacity of the sewage treatment works themselves. That aligns with the independent work that's currently going on in regard to the water cycle study. What the work on the water cycle study at the moment doesn't yet cover is the transmission infrastructure. And that's something that we are getting the consultants to look at before we finalise that report, because it's a key issue we know in Exmouth in terms of that transmission infrastructure. We've been provided with the capacity report that they've done, and I know Councillor Young's looked at that and said that that only covers sort of 200 metres from the site. And we don't have the professional expertise in-house to fully scrutinise that report to know whether or not that's accurate, or indeed what that might mean for capacity further down the chain, as it were. So I think that leaves members with various options in terms of that issue. You can either trust the advice we've been given by South West Water and not impose a Grampian condition, or if members remain concerned, I would suggest that perhaps a route open would be to give delegated authority to myself in consultation with you, Chair, and the ward members to impose the Grampian condition unless we can be satisfied in the meantime, either through South West Water or through independent work that we're having done, i.e. the water cycle study, that there is going to be adequate capacity by the time this development comes forward. Obviously, if members are minded to grant this development, it would be subject to a Section 106 agreement, which will inevitably take at least a couple of months to resolve. So there will be time before any final decision is issued to get that further reassurance and have members scrutinise that through yourself, Chair, and the ward members. So I would see that as a way forward if members remain concerned on that issue and want some further reassurance. That would buy us some time to secure that before any decision is issued.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. I think South West Water's position always is they have adequate sewage capacity so long as it doesn't rain. And that's when the problems start. Okay, which so far this summer has pretty much been the case. Do we have any further questions?
Councillor Levine, then Councillor Bailey.
Okay, and I think Maddie had her hand up again as well. Councillor Levine.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a little dense this morning because I'm not really sure what we're going to vote about. We've talked about affordable homes. We've talked about net loss, biodiversity net loss. We've talked about all sorts of things. If we approve this application, are we implicitly approving everything else with it? I mean, it's supposed to be for access only, but yet we talked about all sorts of things apart from access. So I'm not clear in my mind as whether approval of this implicitly implies that we approve everything else.
Well, it is an outline application only, so I think it's only the S106 agreements and access that we agree at this point. And everything else, the layout, but we do, I mean, the loss of biodiversity is pretty much guaranteed to happen. However, the reserve matters comes back, I think, because that's the opinion of the ecologist in the report that we have. Yep.
So just to be clear, the 25% affordable housing is proposed, and that would be agreed upon today if the members are minded to approve this, that would go into a Section 106 agreement. So today you are being asked to agree the principle of developing the site for 75 houses with the access to be agreed off Denham Way, subject to the heads of terms that are set out in the officer report for the Section 106, which includes the provision of 25% affordable housing. And whilst this scheme represents a 66 or 61% loss as currently proposed, there is a mandatory, there's a legal statutory obligation to provide 10% biodiversity net gain. That has to be secured, and that is set in law. That would happen after the grant of planning permission. The applicant is required to submit a biodiversity gain plan to the council to demonstrate how it will provide a 10% net gain. So we would have to take account of mitigating the 60-odd% that's been lost plus 10%. That is proposed to be done off-site, but in the vicinity of the site. So there will be a biodiversity gain because there has to be by law. So that is what you are being asked to consider today.
Okay, thank you. And that will be provided close to the site, will it?
The applicants have indicated that there is land within the vicinity, so close by. I'm not entirely sure how close, because obviously you can buy credits in habitat banks that can be further afield, but the applicants have got land which I believe was within their control that is relatively close to the site where they envisage providing, which would be subject to their biodiversity gain plan in terms of providing that net gain within the area. Yes.
Okay, thanks very much for that.
Councillor Bailey.
Councillor Bailey. And we're still on questions, by the way, Brian, because the last one we realised afterwards wasn't a question.
Well, yeah, right. Well, I'll give it a whirl and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure, Chairman. I'm just picking up on the point that you made yourself, which was we haven't had any significant rain for, I don't know, quite a few, 6 weeks maybe. However, we still had 2 major incidents within that 6 weeks of South West Water system failing dramatically. Tankering going on through this weekend, and the best part of the week before, there were a lot of tankers running up and down. So the fact that South West Water have made these statements to Mr. Freeman and his colleagues counts for absolutely nothing, because I'm sorry to say they are very much strangers to the truth, because we experience this on a weekly basis. So if they can't handle the system when it's dry, they haven't got a snowball's chance in the winter. So as Mr. Freeman used to say,
you could have framed that
ago,
as a question. How on earth can they do it?
well, I'd just
yeah,
like to ask Mr. Freeman a question, if I may. Mr. Freeman, many years ago, his favourite phrase was infrastructure first. When we had these meetings many years ago, and I haven't heard him say that for a long time. So I'm just wondering why he's not saying that. Why he's not saying infrastructure first, then the houses. Well, we obviously haven't got the infrastructure. And about 30 years ago, this council put a building embargo on for the same reason we're discussing now. South West Water are inadequate. And I think that embargo went on for 5 years. But it certainly concentrated South West Water's mind. And I suggest we could possibly do that again. Thank you, Chair.
Buried in there was a question there. Did you catch it?
Yeah, I didn't realise I was getting known for my catchphrases, to be honest. But,
oh, yes. We'll treat you one day.
I don't remember that particular one. But, I mean, I think, obviously, we want to see infrastructure come forward in sequence with development. And we know that there are issues with wastewater infrastructure in Exmouth at the moment. The key issue is whether or not the infrastructure that's necessary to support this development will be there at the time the development comes forward and is occupied. But I mean, I think in terms of the issues, in terms of the tankering, my understanding is the tankering that's been taking place recently is a result of works that they've been doing to upgrade the system as part of the scheduled works of upgrading in and around the Mare Lane area. And that tankering is a result of that. rather than because of spills or other unexpected issues. I know from looking online yesterday that there was a burst pipe in, was it Elwyn Road, I think, yesterday, but I don't think that's related to these issues specifically. What we were reassured yesterday was that the tankering was a result of the scheduled works for upgrading.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chapman. Okay, that's fine. So in that case, we have no more questions. We can move into debate. Who'd like to kick us off? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm really, really worried about this. I'll go along with my colleague from Lympstone. I know this application says Lympstone and Woodbury, but it's North Exmouth. It's miles from Woodbury and Lympstone. With regard to South West Water, I note their CEO has resigned and gone off with a £200,000 bonus, so we don't know what the new one's like. But my problem is Goodmore's is only half built, and they're still building up the back and behind, and the residents aren't in yet. I would prefer to defer this application completely until Goodmore's is finished and we see how South West Water manages to control it, because I walk my dog every morning. I go down on the Mare, and Eileen probably knows they've pumped out some of the sewers down by the bottom of Victoria Road. They were pumping down there the other day, and for the past 2 weeks, I know Sandy Bay is full. They've been pumping on the Mare, and they've been there every day. So no, I don't believe them, and you're right not to believe them. They're very, very much in cloud cuckoo land. So I would like to see what actually happens when Goodmore and Plum Park are finished, what happens at the Mare there, and what they get up to before we look at any other developments around here. Because if they keep pumping into the sea, we aren't going to get the tourists, and then what are we going to do? Thank you, Chair.
Well, I'm not sure deferral is an option really, but what we could do is impose a condition, as Mr. Freeman has suggested. Suggestion by members, that option is still on the table. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to be popular, but we're here to look at what's good for the district, and we have to build houses. Can't avoid it, and we need to do it in a fairly quick succession, because otherwise we will not get our 5-year housing land supply. And it doesn't matter what happens with the local plan, they can't make it, my understanding is, until we have a 5-year housing land supply in front of us. Much as we can't give it too much weight, the new emerging local plan, if it doesn't happen, we're doomed. So we hope it is going to happen. And if it does happen, this is therefore allowed. So at best, we're going to be putting this off. Ed has said that at the end of the day, sorry, Mr. Freeman has said that at the end of the day, we can put a Grampian restriction on this. You know, I understand we've been doing this in Sidmouth now for an awful long time about how we solve, and we've got the same problems in Sidmouth. I know you've got even more and maybe in Exmouth, but we are still leaking sewage into the sea. But they are going through, and as you say, the problem is when it rains. And they are going through separating out the water supply so that we are just dealing with sewage now. We've got and it's expensive, it's complicated, we've had road blockages, we've had all sorts of things going in Sidmouth. Salcombe Regis is being, again, same thing is happening in Salcombe Regis where they've gone through. They are serving notice now on the people who are putting unauthorised access, they call it, that are dating back 50 or 100 years because they're not supposed to be there. They're taking springs from fields and everything and then pushing it onto the district and county councils. So they are spreading the love, as I call it. I just don't think that we really have an alternative of what you're going to do. Where else are you supplying houses? This is a suitable, in every other way, with this one problem that we can get over with the Grampian condition. So when you're ready, I will happily, or not happily, but I will propose this as per officer regulation with the proviso of the Grampian condition. And I'd like to also, of course, add on my, again, trying to avoid this problem in the first place of the more water butts. I don't understand why every single application that comes for it should have it in it that we try and stop the water going in the system in the first place, because otherwise, you know, there is going to be more rain. It is going to cause more and more problems. We should try and avoid the problem to start with. We need to help South West Water. I know they're not popular, yeah, and we say we don't know who the next CEO is going to be of South West Water. The only thing we know is they're going to be brave to take a job on, because I don't know who else would want it. And that's where I'll leave it at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Howe.
If you're not going to propose it, I will, because quite honestly, well,
I didn't stop you. You just said I didn't offer the ability because I thought we've only just started debate. But if you wish to make a proposal now, we can have some further debate.
I'm very happy to make a proposal, as I just said, as per officer recommendation, with the proviso of that. But I always thought, sorry, that you liked us to wait until later in the debate, but I will do that now.
Well, we can continue debate, can't we? I'll check it with my former chairman here.
Usually the best way. It puts minds a bit straight. Thank you. I'll happily second that with that condition. I mean, fundamentally, we've had a lot of comments about it, about the number of houses is greater than the emerging local plan. Well, yeah, but we want to get more houses on sites, because if we don't, we need more sites to put houses on. So we've got to be really careful about asking for lower densities when really we need to deliver higher densities. And the outline, it is an outline, but the documents here do show a nice plan that could be achievable if the developer comes forward with it. It is quite a nice looking proposal in that respect. I am going along with this and seconding it, but I do wish Mr. Freeman in particular, with his officers, to actually confirm the wording of this Grampian condition, because I do want it, I believe, a little bit stronger than we're proposing, but I want to hear those words explicitly. But that's the only thing I can see is the Grampian condition on the water that we have to impose.
Thank you. So that was a seconding, and yeah, I mean we have previous conditions we could use as an example, I think. Ed, do you want to just comment on what possible wording we could use?
Yeah, just to clarify, Chair, I mean, I haven't got wording of a potential Grampian condition in front of me. As you say, we have a standard condition that we've used elsewhere, so I was envisaging it would be that or an adaptation of that. But what I was suggesting was that it was delegated authority to myself in consultation with you as Chair and the ward members to agree whether or not that's imposed, and the wording of that condition, having considered all the evidence and hopefully had independent verification through the water cycle study or other means to verify what South West Water are telling us, so that we can make an informed decision on whether or not that Grampian condition should be imposed before the decision is issued.
It's usually along the lines of the housing can't be occupied, they can start building them until we are satisfied that we have assurances from South West Water that they can deal with.
So it'd be on that same basis if we consider there is still a need to impose that.
Okay. Right then. We have no further speakers. Councillor Levine, and then I'll come back to you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say that I find it very difficult to vote against to refuse the thing, because I was complicit in the Strategic Planning Committee in approving it in the first place.
It's all right.
So guilty.
We can only give that limited weight, but I agree it can feel a little inconsistent. But it's quite possible that some of the applications that come through in the strategic plan could end up being refused by planning. We won't make ourselves popular. Mr. Freeman will never come here again. But it is possible, theoretically.
Councillor Wragg, Eileen.
Thank you, Chair. I remain very worried about this, the water, the sewerage, and the South West Water themselves said yesterday afternoon in their letter they can only cope with the foul sewage. They can't cope with surface water disposal. Now, I would
But
feel...
there is no, just to be clear, there is no surface water coming off this site.
Well, it hasn't rained, that's why.
Into the sewers. No, into the sewers.
No,
that
that's
it will
right.
discharge into.
That's right,
is it
but that
Watton
means,
Brook?
and
brook,
for
anyway.
those of you who are old enough, that remember the floods of 1960 where the whole of the town, and it started at that end of the town with Bapton Brook. You live in Bapton Lane or wherever, and there's a brook there, and there are lots of brooks and springs, as Maddie said, up on the common. They're all over the place, some underground. So there is an existing problem. We're adding to it, or the developers are adding to it, and the 5-year land supply, it's a developer's charter, pure and simple. That's what it is. They know that we're vulnerable. We have to produce these homes, and that's dictated to by government, whichever government is in at the time, regardless. It's not political on my part anyway. But we have to do that. We have to supply. And developers, obviously, they're going to pounce. They've been holding on to this land for years and years, and now the time is right. And that's what they're doing. That's what land banking is. These, as far as I can see, they're getting away with it. 25% housing, affordable housing. I don't believe it's good enough. I believe that we should have the courage at some point to test some of these applications by refusing them. They might go to appeal, they would go to appeal, no doubt. But the thing is, we have to consider that we have to pay compensation. We have to, the council taxpayer, will be paying compensation if we lose an appeal. It's one hell of a situation to be in, to be honest. I don't know why any of us joined this planning committee when we have to make these sorts of decisions. They're hard decisions, they don't go down well, but sometimes we're forced into the position that we're in now. I'm minded to vote against this, but there again, the responsible part of me says don't, because of the penalties that will be involved. So, and there you have this statutory undertaker. They retain statutory undertakers' rights, but they don't have the responsibilities. Who's going to hold them to account? Their head honcho's gone. She's gone. Who's accountable? Ofwat, absolutely toothless, had dealings with them many, many years ago. That's what got me into politics, South West Water, believe it or not. It's not a vendetta because you can work with the companies, and it's much, much better if you can to achieve long-term positive results. So we're in a dilemma here. There's no question of that. We have to make a decision today. We can't defer it. Otherwise, they go to appeal, and you know, the rest is history, I think. So I think that's by way of explaining to the public, by trying to understand ourselves what the right course would be. And I'm still wondering, but I think I know what I'm going to have to do. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wragg. Councillor Bloxham, we haven't heard from you yet. So.
I don't know how I'm going to follow that, though. Obviously, my colleagues have raised all the things about South West Water, etc., so I'm not going to repeat that. I want to pick up on the bit about the extra contribution required from Devon and Cornwall Police, and I think we do need to consider that seriously, because with all the extra housing coming into East Devon, not just requiring infrastructure, we do need extra police officers to be able to cope with all the things that come along with having extra people in our lovely part of East Devon. So I do want to request that we really do consider that. I know it's a lot of extra work to look at it, and it was a late request, but I'm actually quite pleased that at last they've sat up and listened, and they do need to consider the extra cost for policing. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Barlow?
Just a question for the officers. In the new emerging local plan that we're not giving much weight to, what is the percentage of affordable houses in Exmouth? Is that still 25%? Is that unchanged? And secondly, the time period for submission, we're saying 3 years from the date of this permission, the reserve matters. Can we shorten that to 2? We've spoken about this before, and I think we've done it on 1 before. You know, the whole point of this is to get 5-year housing land supply up. So if we're going to do that, and we're playing their game or they're playing our game, then we need to push them to bring this forward. So it is beneficial, at least to this council, should we decide to approve this.
In relation, answer to your first question about affordable housing, I believe the percentage requirement in the new local plan will be 30%.
In which case, can we split the difference, seeing as if they wait, it'll be 30%, and at the moment it's 25%. Would it be reasonable to make this a condition that this is 27.5% then of affordable housing? Well, it's only 2.5%, but that's going to be an extra 1.8 houses. So at the end of the day, you know, if we're serious about this, they are gaining extra from us. We are going outside of our local plan now, but we are bearing in mind the new plan coming along. Would it be reasonable? Would it be defendable for us to do that?
Through you, Chair, I mean, I think you're again slipping into the realms of giving too much weight to the emerging local plan at that point, and I don't think you can just hedge your bets between the two. You're just kind of creating a whole new policy that doesn't exist at 27.5. So my advice would be stick to the 25%. I know it's not ideal by any means, but I do hope when we get to the second Reg 19 consultation, we'll be able to kind of step up again in terms of the weight that we give to that and start to be a bit more robust on these things. In terms of the period for submission of reserved matters, I think I always have mixed feelings on these things. I know we want the housing to come forward as quickly as possible, but equally, if you shorten the times periods for either implementation or submission of reserved matters, it has the impact of, yes, arguably it's pushing them to submit those more quickly, but equally, if they don't, then it falls out of our housing land supply position a year earlier. So it's a mixed blessing, I suppose. So whether it really will incentivise them to come forward more quickly, I don't know. I haven't had those level of conversations with the developers, but I'm not sure it makes a great deal of difference, if I'm honest.
If you're putting it up to 30% and they'd have to give 5% extra housing, I imagine it would concentrate their mind to bring it forward rather than wait, because then it would have to be resubmitted, I presume.
Well, but we can only make a decision on the policy position today, which is to 25%.
Yes, I mean, the application, if we decide it today, the requirement is 25%. If a new local plan is adopted before reserved matters comes in, that will have no impact at all, because this application has been decided on the previous one, and the S106 agreement will be done on this outline planning application for 25%. So there won't be another one later on that would be subjected to 30.
Unless we put it for 2 years, they don't do it, and then it would have to be reapplied for, which then would be on the new one, wouldn't it? Which would be 30. Oh, look, I'm just trying to help at the end of the day get this more.
It wouldn't, because the affordable housing requirement will be secured as a result of this outline application. That's correct, isn't it, Ed?
Yes, so your time period would only be for the submission of reserved matters. It would only be if the outline consent, if you agreed to grant it today, were left and then expired, and then they had to come in again for outline. That's the only point at which you'd get to reconsider the percentage of affordable housing.
Okay, nice try though. I can see why you're a businessman.
Councillor Howe.
Councillor Howe.
Thank you. Picking up another point our ecologist actually makes, and that's to do with the previous site. He has on his 4th paragraph, given the poor implementation of the habitat planting around the badger set already. Now, I've not managed to read the numerous conditions we're putting on this approval, but he obviously makes the recommendation that appropriate control and monitoring measures to ensure going forward it doesn't get any worse and actually should improve. Have we got those? Are they going to be in place? And are we making sure that when we actually grant a planning permission, like we have next door, that allowed this, that we're not letting the biodiversity just slip under the net and get worse as the building progresses because no one checks it? I have a great worry around that area, and we need to be right in what we're doing. Otherwise, we're just putting words on a piece of paper for no reason. And enforce it.
Yeah, that's down to enforcement, isn't it? I mean, we can't put any more condition on for that. It is a case of enforcement.
That's it.
Okay. In that case, if there are no further speakers, we're ready to go to a vote. So all those in favour?
Shall we just clarify the additional? What we're actually voting on?
Yes. So we've got the outline application and the 106, and I'll let Mrs. Ormsby take over for the rest.
So, so officers are recommending that any approval to grant is subject to delegated authority to officers in consultation with the chair and ward members. Well, actually, the first issue would be so the assistant director and chair to assess the request by the police for the funding to see whether or not it meets the necessary tests for SIL compliance. And depending on the outcome of that, to apply that to the heads of terms or not. Delegated authority for the assistant director in consultation with the chair and ward members to explore further whether or not upgrade works are required at the Mere Lane pumping station prior to occupation, or whether a Grampian condition is needed. And that would be agreed with ward members and the chair prior to the decision being issued. So those 2 delegated matters. In addition, 2 further conditions as recommended by South West Water, one on water conservation, which would take into account whether or not water butts were the best mechanism in depending on the site, but to look at a water conservation condition. The condition regarding water supply, as recommended by South West Water. Is that it in terms of any different conditions? Okay. Yeah.
I just wondered, through you, Chair, could we put a condition on regarding grey water use, water reuse?
So that would come into the water conservation. So that would include water recycling or potential water reharvesting, the various options that could come into play.
I'd still like, Chair, if possible, to put in there a thing. I still think we should do that on any house, that for every bedroom that we have 110 litre water butt to start taking as a minimum. And I don't care what else South West Water want to add to that. And I'm sure that will take into the grey water, because I've looked at what they suggest. But again, they don't, and these have to be fitted, not just added later or given as a present, because then they don't get fitted. So I just don't see why we don't do that as everything.
That would be one for the strategic plan, wouldn't it? Yeah. Okay. Right, I think we are.
One final thing.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was only a very quick thing. There's another adopting appropriate assessment, so can you take that on and second it? So if we can just have that vote in relation to the appropriate assessment first, that's adopted, and then we'll do the substantive vote second. Thank you.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. So those in favour of adopting the appropriate assessment? Okay, those against?
Can we do it again? I thought.
Yeah, okay, those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
And those against? 3. Okay, and any abstentions? 1. Okay, and then those in favour of approving the application subject to the conditions that you have heard? And against? And abstentions? Okay. Okay, right, members. We've been going for 2 hours, so I think, yeah, it's definitely time for a toilet break. It says 5 minutes past, a quarter past. We'll take 10. Back at quarter past. Thank you. Promptly, please.
2-minute warning. Okay, members, I think we're all back. Are we? Yeah, there wasn't anybody there. Just with your personality, you. Okay. So we move on to agenda item 9. This is planning application 24264 MFUL, land north of Saundercroft Road, Broadclist, and that's on pages 95 to 159 of your agenda papers. Okay, and it's Senior Planning Officer Jill Himsworth to present the report.
Thank you very much, Chair. So before I move into the full committee presentation, I would just like to update members on some of the traffic and transport routing implications of the application, as there seems to have been a bit of a misunderstanding between us, Highways, and the applicant. Within the transport statement, there was a proposed route for the construction vehicles serving the battery energy storage site. However, this was not Highways' preferred route. So the preferred route now, and has always been the case, is along the M5, along the B3181, and then the Wimpole Road and Saundercroft Road. So the applicants are very happy to make this change. It was their understanding that Highways preferred the alternative route, but that's not the case. But as I said, they're happy to agree to this revised route. And we have received a revised traffic management plan confirming the intention that that will be the proposed route to the site should the application be approved. So moving on to the rest of the presentation. So this application is before the Planning Committee as the officer recommendation is in conflict with comments received from the Parish Council. This is the application site here, outlined in red. The site is approximately 2.7 kilometres east of the village of Broadclist. You can see the road down here, so the site is well set back from the road. There's a piece of broadleaved woodland directly to the north of the site, which is an unconfirmed wildlife site. And the site is also close to the existing substation here. So the red line for the battery energy storage site goes around here, down to the road, and it also goes back to the substation to allow for the proposed cabling route back to the substation. So there is support in principle for the battery energy storage under Strategy 39 of the local plan, which states that low carbon energy projects will be supported, providing they follow best practice guidance in terms of avoiding adverse impacts on environmental and heritage sensitivity, and ensuring that adequate steps have been taken to avoid harm and reduce and mitigate any unavoidable harm to ensure an acceptable balance between harm and benefit. So approval is sought for a temporary period of 30 years, after which time a condition would ensure that the site would be put back to how it is at the moment. And in terms of the battery energy storage system, it is considered a low carbon energy as it allows for the storage of energy to reduce reliance on fossil fuels and to contribute to energy storage security. So the system would allow for either storage of energy or export of energy, depending on the requirements of the grid at the time. There's also support for the proposal under the National Planning Policy Framework under paragraphs 165, which supports increasing the use of low carbon energy, and also under paragraph 168, which states that significant weight should be given to the benefits associated with renewable and low carbon energy generation. So the scheme proposes a 57 megawatt battery energy storage system, or BESS as they're also known, with associated infrastructure and drainage. So the application principally comprises the battery storage units, which are these rectangles along here. These have approximate dimensions of 10 metres by 3 metres and are approximately 4 metres high. And the power conversion units, which sit alongside those, which are approximately 11.4 metres by 3 metres high. So these convert direct current from the battery and convert it into alternating current so it can go into the grid. Alongside these units, there's also the switch room. There's a small welfare unit for staff. And down here to the south of the site is a 230,000 litre water tank. So the very south of the site, this will be used for the construction compound, but the battery energy storage facility is concentrated in the north of the site. Alongside this scheme, we also have an attenuation pond to the north and a drainage ditch running along the eastern boundary of the site to assist with drainage. So this is a photograph of the proposed site. So you can see the tree, the Addlehold Copse, as it's known, to the north of the site. It's a very gentle, undulating landscape. It's very rural, characterised by farmland. There are a number of other battery energy storage sites and solar arrays nearby, which I'll come on to later on in the presentation. So here we've got some proposed sections through the site. So the site is relatively level. Sorry, there is a slope across the site, and a degree of cut and fill will be required to facilitate the development. So there would be a sloping bank along the northern boundary of the site. This would mean that the works would sit down in the site to reduce the prominence of the proposals. So a quick look through the drawings. That's one of the proposed battery containers. This is one of the power conversion units. A switch room. We've got an auxiliary, an earthing transformer, a switch control room, and we've also got the welfare unit. So alongside the actual battery units and power conversion units, there would be a landscape mitigation plan. So the existing hedges around the edge of the site would be enhanced, and there would also be new hedge planting around the site. So East Devon's landscape officer has no objection to the proposal, but has asked that further details be provided by way of condition should the application be recommended for approval. So these would include further details of lighting, landscaping, planting, management of the landscaping, and the soil management. So obviously fire is a consideration in terms of the BESS application. So the proposed batteries would be lithium iron phosphate cells, which are a type of lithium ion battery. The application is accompanied by an outlined battery safety management plan, which has been reviewed by a chartered fire engineer. It focuses on the battery components of the BESS. So the application adheres to the National Fire Protection Association guidance, which requires a minimum spacing of 3 meters between battery units. And the application and the batteries are sited at least 10 meters away from vegetation, again as required by the guidance. Each enclosure is fitted with a thermally activated aerosol suppression system, a liquid cooling system to stabilize temperatures, and a ventilation system to maintain safe gas concentrations. So the site will be monitored remotely, so any changes in temperature would be flagged immediately. So the nearest property to the site are 166 meters away to the east of the site, which is greater than the 25 millimeter recommendation of the National Fire Chief guidance. The water supply down here aligns with the recommendations contained with the guidance in terms of the amount of water required for cooling of the batteries during the fire. And there is a fire hydrant roughly 740 meters to the southwest of the site. So it's important to note that in the rare event of a fire, water is not used to put out the fire, but it's used to cool the batteries, and the actual battery itself that is on fire, it would be left to burn. The scheme has been reviewed by Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service, and they have no objections to the proposal and say that the scheme broadly aligns with the recommended guidance. They have recommended that should the application be be approved, an emergency response plan is prepared in conjunction with Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service prior to commencement on site. The drainage is also a key feature here. So the site soil investigations showed that infiltration rates are very low. So there is an attenuation pond here and a drainage ditch along the eastern boundary. So these are sized so that Should there be a fire at the same time as a storm, these are adequately sized so that there would be no overrun from these two features. They are basically sealed systems that would be shut off in the case of a fire, and any water in there would be emptied out and tested for contamination and would be cleaned up rather than being released into the environment. The application is accompanied by a tree protection plan. And East Devon's tree officer has no objections to the proposal. An ecological impact assessment has also been submitted with a proposal with a dormouse survey and a ground level bat survey of trees. The site supports hazel dormouse, and a couple of sections of trees would be removed for the cabling route and for getting large items of machinery onto site. So a mitigation license would be required in respect of these. EDCC's ecologist has noted that the SUDS feature provides an opportunity to improve ecological value on the site and to enhance foraging opportunities for bats and other wildlife. Our ecologist has recommended that a number of bat and bird boxes should be increased with the application. So a number of conditions are also proposed in this respect, that the application complies with the submitted environmental assessment, and that an ecological management plan is submitted prior to commencement on site. The scheme has also demonstrated that it would achieve a 10% gain in biodiversity net gain on the site through all habitat types. And the habitat creation would be maintained for 30 years and monitored under the provisions of the B&G recommendations. So this is a slide looking at other approved solar farms and BESS sites. So the red site here, this is the site we're looking at the moment. The dark blue site are the approved BESS sites. These are two further BESS sites under consideration here. And then the green hatching is approved solar farms. The grey is the location, is the existing substation. The site is categorised as grade 3B land, so there's no concerns in respect of local plan policy about the loss of agricultural land. In terms of highways, obviously we've spoken already about the proposed rerouting via the B3181 rather than the route originally proposed. The construction phase would last approximately 9 to 12 months, and there would be a total of 510 HGV movements predicted across that phase. Once the site is up and running, the site would be accessed for weekly maintenance only. In terms of residential amenity, a noise impact assessment has been submitted with the application, which demonstrates that the proposed noise levels would be within acceptable limits. There is an acoustic fence proposed along the eastern and southern boundaries of the site. Environmental Health have commented that the proposed working hours are excessive, and therefore a revised SEMP would be required to reduce these down to 8 AM to 6 PM Monday to Friday and 8 AM till 1 PM on a Saturday. In summary, subject to the revised SEMP, it's not considered that there would be any adverse impacts to residential amenity. There's another image of the site, so this is the best site in here. In terms of heritage, the archaeological geophysical survey undertaken has identified 2 areas of possible pits within the area. Therefore, a programme of archaeological work would be undertaken to investigate, record and analyse any archaeological evidence. In terms of foul drainage, there is a toilet proposed on site for the use of staff welfare, which would use a cesspool. This is the option of last resort as defined by the drainage hierarchy. But because of the poor infiltration results at the site, this is considered acceptable in this instance. So in summary, looking at the benefits of the proposal, the scheme accords with local plan policy strategy 39. Any impacts of the site would be further reduced by additional planting. Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service are satisfied that the proposal meets the recommended guidance in terms of reducing fire risk. The scheme would not lead to harm to protected species. A 10% uplift in biodiversity net gain would be achievable on the site. There are no highway objections. And the scheme would lead to a reduction in carbon dioxide emissions and reduction in reliance on less secure forms of energy generation. In terms of the harms of the proposal, there would be visual impacts. However, these are considered to be low owing to the siting and would also be further mitigated by the additional planting. So below is a schedule of the recommended conditions. Some of these are pre-commencement, but in summary, these relate to the emergency response plan, decommissioning, archaeological investigation, a waste management plan, construction and environmental management plan, detailed drainage design, compliance with the ecological impact assessment, submission of a construction and ecological management plan, detailed landscaping proposals, submission of a landscape and ecology management plan, submission of revised tree protection plan, the BNG plan to be submitted, submission of a battery safety management plan, details of the proposed acoustic fence, access details into the entrance to the site off Saundercroft Road, and a condition to ensure that the access for emergency services is kept clear at all times. So subject to the above conditions, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Jill. So we'll move to speakers. So from Broadclyst Parish Council, we have the Assistant Clerk, Gemma Cole.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Broadclyst Parish Council supports the principle of renewable energy infrastructure, including battery storage, as part of transition to a net zero energy system. However, we must be clear, we do not support this application in its current form. While progress has been made, key matters remain unresolved, and until those are addressed and secured through formal conditions, this proposal poses an unacceptable risk to our amenity and safety of our community and the integrity of rural infrastructure. We acknowledge the applicant's verbal agreement to avoid Station Road and instead use the B3181 Wimpole Road as the construction access route. That is welcome. Verbal assurances are not a substitute for enforceable planning conditions, and we therefore ask the committee to require submission and approval of the updated construction traffic management plan. The plan must explicitly secure access via the B3181 Wimpole Road, and that plan must prohibit any use of Station Road or other unsuitable rural lanes. This will ensure protection of vulnerable road users, particularly large numbers of school children and local residents who walk and cycle along our rural road network. We also request that this application be subject to the same construction management traffic hours as the neighbouring consented BESS application 230962 MPhil, which states, vehicular movement shall be restricted between 8 AM and 6 PM Monday to Friday, 9 AM to 1 PM Saturday, with no movements on Sundays or bank holidays unless agreed in advance. It's entirely reasonable to accept consistent treatment of two directly adjacent, near identical developments. If anything, this scheme's closer proximity to homes strengthens the case for such a condition. Further concerns also remain. We ask for enforceable commitments to inspect and repair damage to the construction route at regular intervals, backed by a financial bond. We seek clarity on sustainable drainage to ensure the proposal complies with Neighbourhood Planning Policy DC3, which requires runoff to be reduced, not maintained. And we request formal confirmation from Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service that the appropriate emergency access plan is in place for this site. In conclusion, we're not objecting to the principles of best infrastructure. We're asking for basic safeguards to be properly secured. Safeguards that are necessary, proportionate and aligned with both planning policy and local precedent. Unless and until those conditions are in place, the Parish Council remains unable to support the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we move on to the agent. I've got Naomi Haikelo. I'll let you pronounce that. And Graham Roberts. Are you going to split the time between you? How are you
We
going to
are,
do
yes.
it? Yep.
So thank
okay.
you. Thank you, Chair.
3 minutes, off you go.
Okay, good morning. Good afternoon. My name is Naomi Hakelo, and I'm the Development Manager for Westcroft Battery Storage with EDF Renewables. EDF develops, builds, and operates our project for their full life. We take a long-term view, and we strive to work closely with communities and consultees throughout the lifetime of each project. The proposals will make an important contribution to preventing the waste of renewable energy, reducing carbon emissions, and supporting energy security and affordability. Our site is located next to the Exeter National Grid substation and is well removed from Saundercroft Road with very limited visibility from public viewpoints. Our biodiversity and landscape plans, including new hedgerows, will result in an overall biodiversity net gain on site of almost 30%, far in excess of the 10% legal requirement. We have recently amended our construction vehicle route to avoid Station Road in response to Parish Council feedback, and will accept a condition to that effect. We will remain in contact with the local community before and during construction to minimize the potential impacts. There are no built-up residential areas close to our site, and the nearest dwelling is over 160 meters away, with no adverse noise impacts. Furthermore, there are no sensitive aquifers near our site, in contrast with some of the other recent battery proposals in the area. There are no outstanding technical objections to this application. The proposal is supported by and complies with all relevant planning policies, and we therefore respectfully ask that the committee endorses the officer's strong recommendation for approval. I will now hand over to our Principal Engineering Manager, who will explain our approach to battery safety.
Good afternoon. My name is Graham Roberts. I'm the Principal Engineering Manager for EDF Renewables UK and Ireland. I'm a chartered engineer with 25 years of experience, including the last 8 focused on battery energy storage systems. We recognise that fire safety is a legitimate concern, and as a responsible developer, and importantly as an operator, we take a structured, evidence-led approach. We follow both UK and international guidance, actively learn from global incidents, and hold regular safety reviews to improve our processes. These include, amongst many things, rigorous supply qualification, fire risk and event analysis, giving us a deeper understanding of design mitigations that cover these sensitive topics around fire and its consequences. We also invest significantly in research and testing. Our goal is not just to prevent incidents, but to stay at the forefront of safety and ensure that we can understand and manage even the most unlikely of scenarios. We've consulted with Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service and provided an outlined battery safety management plan. We will continue to work closely with stakeholders to develop a more detailed version, along with an emergency response plan for approval by the Council. I'm here today to support the application and provide reassurance by answering any questions you may have regarding battery safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Admirable. You only overran by 10 seconds there, and I think I held you up for that 10 anyway. Okay, thank you very much. So we move on to ward members. Councillor Eleanor Rylance. Wendy, you're going to read that one out.
Yes, that's correct. So Councillor Rylance endorses the comments sent in by Broadcliff Parish Clerk regarding the use of Station Road as a route for construction traffic. It is already quite unsuitable for HGVs, especially the bends and the hairpin bridge over the railway, and is constant gridlock at both ends due to the narrowness of the exits, with buildings right up to the road edge at each end, and traffic from Station Road joining busy roads at each end. There is also the matter of the ford at Broadcliff Station, which is impassable at times by vehicular traffic. Giving construction traffic permission to use this road would be, in my opinion, be disastrous. Thank you.
Okay. And Councillor Fernley. Yeah, fine.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. I'll keep this short, as the parish has said all of the objections that we had talked about. Batteries are a necessary tool in the energy transition. If the parish concerns have been addressed, I support the application. As has been mentioned earlier, we need to make sure ecological conditions are fitted, planted, etc. I'm seeing too many developments where this is not happening and where trees have been damaged. This is a very rural setting. Let's try and support nature in the countryside where we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, questions, Councillor Barlow?
Thank you. Can you just confirm to us, please, that the worries of the parish councillor and the ward member have been taken care of in the construction and environment management plan or the construction and ecological management plan? I don't know if there's a difference in that or they are one and the same thing. But are they up to date? Are they exactly as it, does it answer all the questions of the parish council? Thank you.
So we have received a revised transport statement which details the proposed route along the B3181. The only thing that remains to be clarified is the construction environment management plan in respect to the working hours. So that is conditioned that we need a revised construction environment management plan prior to commencement on site.
But we're happy we can make a condition to do that so that we are going to, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Wragg?
Yeah, regarding the welfare unit, what would that consist of, please? Whoever.
So it's a relatively small building, so there will be personnel on site probably weekly. There'll be a toilet in there, there'll be space to hang a coat, store tools. I mean, I could ask this question of the applicant. I don't know if the applicant could would be in a better position to answer that than me, if that's okay.
Yeah, and also the size. And it is a fixed, it's not like a mobile unit.
It is a fixed building. It's not very big at all, given that it won't be very well used.
Yeah, it's a welfare facility for any visiting staff if they're conducting inspections or maintenance on site, just to have a place to store their goods, to sit down, and there will also be a loo in that building. That's it.
Thank you. I think it's in the plans, but yeah, I'm not sure I noted the actual scale of it. Yeah. Councillor Gazzard.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And apologies if this is a question that Ian Barlow asked just now. I couldn't hear him very well up here. It's just on the Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service piece on page 100. It says the proposal broadly aligns with the recommended guidelines introduced by the NFCC and NFPA. When you say broadly, does that mean it covers most of the things, or are there some things that are not covered in there, please?
I think the only comment from Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue was that some of the provisions, there's two separate guidance. There's the NFCC and the other one, which I've forgotten the acronym. There seem to have adhered to both sets rather than being consistently adhering to one or the other. So that would need to be resolved in any battery energy safety plan coming forward.
So, sorry, I come back. So that's a national issue rather than a local issue, isn't it? That's got to be resolved between the two bodies. Is that what you're saying?
No, as in there's two different sets of guidance, which can I refer this question back to EDF's fire engineer, if that's okay?
Hi there. Yes, so the NFCC is guidance and it offers a recommended spacing, but that recommended spacing can be adjusted depending on the specifics of the design. So it allows a narrower spacing or a wider spacing. So the NFPA guidance from the US allows a spacing of around 3 meters. So the NFCC starts at 6 meters, but says subject to the design precautions that you take, that can be modified to suit, and that can actually be modified right down to a very narrow spacing if you've got suitable precautions. So on our site, we've actually adopted a spacing that's wider than the NFPA guidance of 3 meters. We've got about 3.3 meters between each individual kind of battery set or battery unit, effectively. Does that make sense? So they're not conflicting, they're kind of complementary with slightly different starting points. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, it's gone. I'd like to ask where the nearest fire hydrant is to this, please. And I'd also like to ask, in the decommissioning process, has it been established that it's safe regarding taking the installation out? Are there any attendant problems that we don't know about? I know it's going to be a long time in the future. And also, how long is this expected to live as an active BESS situation? Thank you.
So the application seeks approval for 30 years. So one of the conditions on the approval is that after 30 years and 6 months, the site would have to be restored back to its former condition. In respect to the nearest fire hydrant, it's 740 metres. It's off the bottom of this slide, but it's down here. So there's 230,000 litres of water within the proposed tank, which Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Services says is enough with the guidance. They would be able to bring additional water to site, subject to there not being other fires in other locations. In response to the decommissioning, I'm afraid that's not something I'm able to answer. I don't know whether EDF's fire engineer would be able to comment on that at all.
So with regard to the decommissioning, the battery actually has effectively kind of 2 lifetimes, in that there's an anticipated lifetime for the main battery equipment to be around 15 years with a replacement at year 15, and there's no real foreseeable issues with that. The batteries will be discharged and the units will be uplifted and removed from site and replaced by new units. And at the end of the 30 years, there would be kind of a similar approach to the removal of the batteries again, and then effectively the removal of the other structures on the site and foundations, etc., as required under the approval. It's relatively minimal impact, effectively, from the foundations and the structures of the type that we need to remove. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Levine.
Thank you, Chair. May I ask a technical question? In the application, it says that they're going to use lithium iron phosphate batteries. Has it been mentioned simply because there's something special about those batteries? Are they common to every other BESS? I mean, we just been discussing a BESS application at our previous meeting where we were worried about fire risk, etc. So are these batteries supposed to be better, more stable? Or why have they been mentioned compared? I really would like to find out if it's a safer facility than the previous ones that we had to deal with.
I think that's a reasonable question.
Again, if I could refer that question to Graham Roberts.
I was going to suggest exactly that, Jill.
Acceptable.
Yeah, if you'd like to comment just on the different types of battery that are available and their relative safety, or would be good.
No problem. Yeah, so it is important because the first generations of battery systems that people are familiar with and quite often refer to when there have been fire incidents in the past are typically a different chemistry. So there are many, many different types of lithium-ion batteries. But the primary ones used for stationary storage have historically been NMC, which is a nickel manganese cobalt type battery, and they're the older generation, which are potentially less stable than LFP batteries. Hence why we make a specific reference to LFP batteries, because they are seen to be more stable, safer solutions for this kind of application. So that's the reason why that's mentioned. Is that satisfactory? Or?
Thank you. I just want to say, I've just read the Wikipedia page on the battery, so it's exactly what they say.
You know more than me now then.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions? No? In that case, we'll go into debate. Ian?
Thank you, Chair. Well, we've had lots of BESSes before, and we have had the ferrous-ion batteries brought up 2 BESSes ago, but we didn't pass that because we weren't happy with the expertise they said. And also, I think we were very unhappy because it was sitting on aquifers, which was the main thing we were concerned about. So it wasn't so much the fire. The fire is bad. You don't want to be breathing the smoke in or anything like that. But it was the water runoff that we were concerned about. They also explained, as we've had explained by the officers, that they don't flood the actual burning batteries. Should they ever burn, they try and cool the adjacent batteries and allow the battery to burn because they don't want to get the contamination. So I think this is slightly different, that A, because there is no, the water almost seals itself, the ground it seems, there is no aquifers in the area. These have to be, and quite rightly, they have to be in the right place. We've answered, you know, with the power, the acceptable power pickup points, etc. We have answered the questions, and we have dealt with the problems from the parish council, which again are due to the access, etc., the construction. So with that in mind, I am very happy to approve this as per officer recommended, or propose approval as per officer recommendation. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Gloxham?
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to second that for all the reasons that Councillor Barlow's just said. When I first read this, I was horrified because I do know that area well, and I thought, no way can they actually go the construction traffic in that way. So I'm delighted to see that that's been addressed, and therefore I'm quite happy to support it.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask officers, actually, have we had any modification on the working hours? Because I think that was one of the things that the parish council asked for. I think the working hours were up to 7 p.m, was it?
Sorry, Chair, it was going to be the same as the other BESS that we've just passed. So it was just, that's what I was happy, and that's the question asked, that we were assured that they would be the same.
So the application is conditioned at the moment that an amended construction and environmental management plan is submitted prior to commencement on site, which would adhere to the working hours stated. So 8 till 6 Monday to Friday, and 8 until 1 p.m. on Saturdays, and no working on Sundays.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So we have a proposer and seconder. Any further speakers? No, are you sure? You know, just because it's getting near lunchtime. Councillor Gazzard.
I think we've had quite a few of these over the last, I don't know how long it's been a while. But I think the way that this plan has been laid out has put most of us in a better place, if you like, with and I'd just like to compliment the applicant for the way that they've answered the questions. So I think in my own mind, I'm a lot happier with this application than I've been with previous applications. Thank you.
Yes, I think as we have to take each one on its merits, and certainly some of the previous ones we weren't satisfied with pollution of groundwater or appearance on the landscape. I think we had one recently, but this one seems to answer both of those. Okay, so we've had it proposed and seconded. There are no further speakers, so we can go to a vote. So all those in favour? I think we've got an appropriate assessment again, have we?
We haven't, no. No, it's unanimous. Yeah, we haven't got a full assessment.
That's unanimous. No, there's no appropriate assessment on this one. I thought there was. Okay, in that case, that's passed. Okay, so that brings us to agenda item 10. This is planning application 250711 FUL. This is Moss Hayden Farm, West Clyst. And the Vice Chair and Chair are both going to
vacate the seats. No, we'll stay out of the lunch. Well, I will. So we are going to depart and hand over to the voted in temporary chair and vice chair, as we have a directly related NRI here. Okay, so normal business will resume in a few minutes. No, we're not adjourning the meeting. I see Maddie has left, but I think she had to go.
Sorry, I'm just looking at the screen.
Oh, you have to click on that.
Right, thank you. And now we're on item 10, 25-07114, Moss Hain Lane, Westcliss. Jill, could you please take us through it?
Thank you very much. So this application is before Planning Committee as the officer recommendation is in conflict with comments received from the ward councillor and from the parish council. Temporary retrospective approval is sought for the siting of a small dwelling for 2 rural workers at Moss Hain Farm. So this is Moss Hain Farm up here, and this is the application dwelling down here. So in terms of the site, Moss Hain Farm comprises a range of historic and modern agricultural buildings and a farmhouse which sit either side of Moss Hain Lane, which is this lane through here. Oh. Apologies. So Moss Hain Lane runs down here through the site, which is a private lane, public footpath and cycle path, which runs between West Clist to the north of the site and Clist Honiton to the south of the site. The farm comprises 290 acres of land, of which 160 is owned and 130 acres are rented. The site produces organic vegetables and has a small flock of hens. In terms of the site designations, there are no formal landscape designations which apply to the site, but the site is within the Clist Valley Regional Park. So there's the red line application for the site. The dwelling is up here, and the nearest highway is down to the south of the site within Clist Honiton. So local plan policy H4 allows permission for dwellings for persons employed in rural businesses where there is a proven and essential agricultural or rural business need. In the case of a temporary dwelling, a financial assessment has been provided setting out projected future operations and demonstrates future operational viability. Where the qualifying test of occupancy is met, so there's at least 1 full-time worker, where there are no other buildings on the holding suitable for conversion, and where any permission granted will be subject to an occupancy condition tying it to the relevant business. So this is the application site plan. So the dwelling is here. The application building is 7 metres long by 2.5 metres deep and has a covered veranda to the south. So the building is timber clad to the lower levels and has black composite cladding to the upper levels of the scheme. When the committee report was written, we hadn't received floor plans of the building, but we subsequently have. So the area referred to in the committee report is not correct. That says that the building is 16 square metres, whereas actually there is a first floor within the building. So the building provides a total area of 28.2 square metres. So in terms of the farm operations, the vegetable growing has increased from 37 acres in 2023 to 45 acres in 2025. The farm also has 2 honesty boxes selling vegetables and eggs. One is at the farm site, and the other one is on to the south of the site on the junction with Black Horse Lane in Clisthoniton. The farm has plans to expand with current applications for polytunnels and ideas potentially for a manned shop in future. So in terms of addressing the policy requirements for the need for the staff, the farm currently employs 6 staff through the peak months. 3 of the farm partners live within the farmhouse but are part-time owing to their other commitments. The applicant has submitted budgeted labour hours for 2025 based on previously recorded hours per crop and acreage, and the local planning authority doesn't have any reason to doubt these stated figures. However, no business plan has been provided to demonstrate future viability. In terms of the needs to live on the site, the application states that organic vegetables is a very labour-intensive enterprise, and having staff on site who are able to do work at short notice is a benefit. The irrigation system needs monitoring during evenings and weekends in the summer, and the farm also has 100 hens which need letting out at dawn and are shut in again at dusk. The farm also has a pilot project to feed insect larvae to the hens, and the application states that the insects also need looking after. The honesty shop at the farm also requires topping up, particularly over the weekend. So here's a photograph of the dwelling from Marseille Lane. So this is looking to the south, so you can see the upper levels of the dwelling there. The lane is a well-used public footpath and cycle path which runs through the middle of the farm, which makes the farm vulnerable to vandalism and trespassing and theft. However, security is seldom justification for a rural dwelling, and there are still 3 residents within the existing farmhouse. The business is dominated by horticulture, which has a lower propensity to need round-the-clock attention than caring for livestock does. The applicant states that should the application be refused, the use of agency labour would incur additional costs. However, the provision of cheaper labour throughout the year is not one of the reasons or tests that should justify a second dwelling at this site. Therefore, the local planning authority feels that insufficient justification of which elements of horticulture and welfare require a 24/7 on-site presence beyond the timeframe of a normal working day, including evidence that this need would subsist throughout the year. The farm is close to other accommodation at West Clyst and Exeter. The application is for a temporary dwelling for a period of 3 years. In terms of the height of the building and its siting away from the farmhouse, it's a standalone incongruous structure rather than had it been sited closer to the farmhouse, where it would be read in conjunction with the existing agricultural buildings and its impacts would have been minimised. In terms of the residential amenity, nationally described space standards would not normally apply to an application for a temporary caravan for a rural worker. However, the submitted application would not meet the requirements of allowing it to be classified as a caravan and it has been constructed as a permanent structure. 3 years is a significant time period to live in accommodation, which at 28 square metres is substantially lower than the national described minimum space standards for a dwelling for 2 people, which would be 50 square metres. That's the existing farmhouse to the north of the site. Here's an aerial image of the site. So the farm is up here and the proposed dwelling is down here. The ward councillor's comments about the location are noted in that it would appear to be against climate change to require workers to live further from the farm. However, people tend to travel to their workplace once a day, whereas they make multiple trips a day to access services such as schools, leisure facilities, shops and pubs. The site is in the countryside and not in a sustainable location. This access along Moss Hayne Lane is unlit at a reasonable distance from the built-up area boundary and wouldn't meet the test of it being a sustainable location in terms of the tilted balance. So in terms of the harms of the application, insufficient evidence have been provided that there is an essential functional need for a new dwelling on the site. The proposed dwelling is sited away from the rest of the farm buildings, and the proposed dwelling would be highly visible from the adjacent public footpath. The application has not demonstrated that the farm would be has future operational viability, and the proposed accommodation is substantially smaller than required under the national described space standards, but would not meet the definition of a caravan. The application is therefore recommended for refusal on the grounds of these reasons. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jill. On behalf of Broadcliffe Parish Council again, we have Assistant Clerk Emma Cole.
Chair, members of the committee. This is the representation in support of the planning application 250714 for the temporary siting of rural workers' dwellings at Moss Hayne Farm, West Clyst. This application must be considered in the context of the development plan, which for Broadcliffe Parish includes the Broadcliffe Neighbourhood Plan. That plan remains the most locally specific and up-to-date policy framework for the parish, and it directly supports proposals such as this one. Policy H3 of the Broadcliffe Neighbourhood Plan explicitly supports temporary accommodation for agricultural workers where the business is established and expanding, there's an essential functional need for on-site presence, there are no viable alternative dwellings, and the proposal is modest and proportionate to the need. Each of these tests is met. The supporting business operates 290 acres with over 6,000 labour hours planned for 2025. Organic vegetable production is not only labour intensive, but demands flexibility for irrigation, crop production and livestock care outside of standard working hours. The unit is clearly viable and growing, with contracts in place and new infrastructure like polytunnels coming forward. These facts are not in dispute. The officer report concludes that the functional need is not sufficiently proven. Yet policy H4 of the East Devon local plan allows temporary dwellings where functional need is emerging and viability is building. The farm is not new. It's been restructured since 2018, but its organic horticultural enterprise is still developing and needs continuity in experienced labour. That is exactly the circumstance in which temporary accommodation is intended. The report also suggests that the structure causes harm to landscape character. However, this is a modest, low-impact building adjacent to the farm shelter and partially screened from the public view. Its visibility is no greater and arguably far less harmful than the extensive strategic housing development that has already transformed the setting around West Clyst. The current landscape impact of this small structure is negligible by comparison. Moreover, the site lies adjacent to the Clyst Valley Regional Park and within walking and cycle distance of new communities. The requiring essential staff to travel to the site would undermine the aims of NBPF paragraphs 161 and 163 on sustainable development and climate mitigation. The neighbourhood plan and emerging policies within the draft East Devon local plan all seek to reduce transport emissions and support the local economy. The proposal is entirely aligned with that objective. In summary, the development plan for this area, particularly the Broadcliff Neighbourhood Plan, supports this application. The building is temporary, proportionate, and enables a growing local agricultural enterprise to operate efficiently and sustainably. I respectfully ask members to weigh this application against the actual planning policy in place and approve it with the reasonable conditions already supported by the Parish Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next, we've got Ella Gent on behalf of the applicant.
My name is Ella Gent. I'm one of the farm partners at Moss Hayne Farm, and I believe that there is a functional need for staff to live on site and also that the business is financially viable. This is an application for a temporary accommodation, mainly off-grid, no additional burdens on South West Water or anything that can cause concern like that. In response to the claim that vegetables don't require 24/7 staffing presence, I'd reply that vegetable crops do require monitoring outside of normal work hours. We've just been through the third heat wave of the year. We've had to use our irrigation system 24/7, 7 days a week. Cam and Kate's home is next to the borehole with the pump house, and they monitor the irrigator and turn it off in the late evening. In June, when the daylight hours were longest, they were out in the fields at 11 p.m. and at 4 a.m, deterring rooks from pulling out our squash plants. This is one of our main crops, and we lost hundreds of plants, but without Cam and Kate, we would have lost the whole crop. Additionally, a third part of our business are the 2 farm honesty shops. With a heavily used public footpath running through the middle of the farm and so many local people visiting the farm animals such as pigs and chickens, especially during the evenings at weekends, we need people to do animal welfare checks, keep an eye on the shop stock, top up as required, and manage it and the people there very carefully. As mentioned, there are 3 farm partners living on the farm, myself and my 2 parents, but we cannot cover all the out-of-hours work. I have 2 very small children, and my wife works at the hospital, making evening farm tasks impossible. My parents are often unavailable for evening and weekend work and are soon to retire anyway, leaving me as sole partner, and I will not be able to run the farm without staff on site. A second reason for refusal was the lack of detailed business plan with precise financial forecasts. As mentioned, we have had a big change, and we have sold the dairy herd in 2018. I took on the farm management then, and since then it's been a steep learning curve to make the change to vegetables. We've made a huge change at a time when across the country farming has become more precarious, with the pandemic, climate change related weather extremes, Brexit, and constantly changing farm subsidy payments. We've spent the last 5 years putting in huge investments. With the new borehole, we built a new building to store vegetables in with a specialised vegetable chiller room, and we've bought new machinery for planting and mechanical weeding. This year, we invested in polytunnels for protected cropping, and Cam has focused on creating a market garden to provide around the year supply of vegetables for our farm shops. We have had a contract to supply Riverford with organic vegetables since 2018, and we've increased our vegetable acreage then. Our honesty shops have had an increase of 250% sales in the previous 12 months. It's hard for any farm to show precise financial forecasts, but we have farmed for 5 generations and hope to continue for many more. Therefore, I would contend that having Cam and Kate live in their temporary rural workers accommodation is an integral part of our small sustainable farming business. They're passionate and committed to help in the evenings, early mornings and at weekends, and it's through them living on site that our honesty shops have stayed a success, drawing nearby residents to use active travel to buy affordable, local and sustainable produce. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ward Member, Councillor Fernley.
Thank you, Chair. This application is a modest, climate-friendly and community-supported temporary dwelling that supports a growing organic farming business at Moss Hayne. It enables 2 rural workers, young, low-paid and committed, to live on site where they are needed for early morning, evening and weekend tasks, irrigating crops, looking after hens and pigs, protecting produce from pests, the public, and restocking the Honesty Box farm shop. That's outside their normal working hours. Policy H4 and functional need are met in the context of a growing enterprise. There is a clear agricultural need. Organic vegetable farming is demonstrably labour-intensive and weather-dependent, which requires flexibility, rapid response and availability that a living worker provides. A temporary consent is specifically allowed under policy H4 where long-term viability is still developing. NPPF paragraph 161 and 163 directly support this application. Forcing workers to commute instead of living on site increases carbon emissions, undermines sustainable transport policies, contrary to Strategy 5B, reduces resilience to climate impacts. Supporting rural workers living close to work is critical to decarbonising food production and supporting low-carbon rural economies. The application includes solar panels and a composting toilet system consistent with environmental best practice. The dwelling is modest, reversible and causes minimal harm. Siting. While not clustered with existing dwellings, the caravan is sited within a group of old farm buildings, which reflects practical operational reasons near the borehole pump, pigs and honesty boxes. It's tiny and discreet with limited visibility. I walk past this little caravan regularly. I thought it was a posh chicken shed until this application came through. Only the first photographs you have been given shows the caravan from the public footpath. The access to take the group of 3 can only be taken from a private road. That is misleading. Planning policy isn't absolute. It requires judgment and balance. I mean not to hit the wrong button at the wrong time. Policies like Strategy 7 and H4 are not meant to prevent all rural housing. They aim to prevent unjustified or speculative development, which is clearly not the case here. It is not a luxury development. Equity and fairness. The planning system has a duty to consider impacts on disadvantaged groups. Under the Equality Act 2010, public bodies, including planning authorities, must consider whether a decision disproportionately affects people based on age, income, or other protected characteristics. In this case, the workers are young people in insecure, low-paid jobs, a group already disadvantaged in the housing market. Both the Parish Council and myself support this application with sensible conditions, a 3-year temporary consent, an occupancy tie, and a review linked to business progress. This is a pragmatic solution, low risk and easily reversible. This is a modest dwelling that is small, climate conscious, on-site home for rural workers priced out of the area. Approving this temporary structure doesn't undermine planning policy. It shows the committee understands how to apply it fairly and intelligently in the real world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Committee, questions? To be fair, we declared uniform lobbying for everybody on. Yeah, but good point. We'll catch that in a bit after this one. Councillor Barlow, then.
One question, please. How long has this structure been in place before this has come through? Cheers.
Good question. I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid. I would at least a year.
And have we had any complaints about it?
It came in as an enforcement complaint. That's how it was brought to the local planning authority's attention.
Committee? Again?
So it's a debate now, Chair, yeah?
Councillor Gazzard first, then, in that case.
Thank you, Chair. Basically, I'm leaning towards supporting this application. I understand what the officers have said, but I think from what the applicant has said is that there obviously is a proven need for this residence here, or this temporary building. So at the moment, I'm still making my mind up, and I'll listen to the debate, but at the moment I'm more leaning towards supporting the application. Thank you.
Yehudi, have you got a question, or are you?
No, I just want to debate. Exciting.
We'll go to debate then. Yehudi first, then I'll come down to you.
Thank you, Chair. What I really wanted to say is, when I get applications in my ward for temporary accommodation like this, my knee-jerk reaction is to reach for the button on my keyboard that says never in a million years. In this case, I can't. I think that it is a good application, and I think there are good reasons why this thing is necessary. Quite different from the many applications that I get in my ward. So in my opinion, I think we ought to support this application. That's all I wanted to say.
Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. We've been through some difficult ones this morning, and we've got a few difficult ones this afternoon. I must admit, when I first saw this and saw that it was refuse, like Councillor Levine, I was concerned that someone was trying to pull a fast one and get a van in a place and then get a house in a place and the rest of it. We spend so much time trying to build communities with planning. We do strategic planning to build these communities, to get people to work together, to provide, you know, the perfect thing where you can walk to get your food and all the rest of it. And here is something that has done that works with the community, that's supported by the parish, supported by the ward member, obviously the community, the shop is being used, all of these things stick together. And yet they're asking for a 3-year temporary accommodation for someone that's been there for at least a year. I just wonder sometimes if a little bit of common sense shouldn't be used, and why, again, are we wasting so much time and things, their time, our time, when we're busy, and I'm sure they're busy, for something really that I think should just be, yes, this should be allowed. And certainly I would like to make a recommendation that we go against, I'm afraid, officer recommendation on this one and support this application as per the stipulation of the parish council that they put through, i.e. 3 years, and again, that it supports H4 on the, I will let Wendy, who is much better at this, help me with H4 of what actually the emerging needs and sustainable, where it will actually, we will be allowed to grant this, because I don't want you getting in any trouble.
Councillor Collins.
I would like to second what Councillor Barlow has said. Coming from a farming family, after listening to sort of all of the comments and stuff so far, farming is a 24/7 occupation. It doesn't fall within regular working hours, and sort of as mentioned with the heat that we've had, you know, trying to keep sort of on top of all of the crops and everything like that to make sure that they do have a successful yield when it comes to harvesting, I think is important. And I do believe that there is a clear need for this. And I think also to describe the structure as a highly incongruous structure is a little bit of an exaggeration, sort of looking at the picture. You know, it's you know, you can see it over the hedge, but I don't think anyone really is going to be that bothered by it. I don't think that that's, you know, sort of a fair description of it. But yeah, I would be in support of Councillor Barlow's proposal and happy to second.
Before I go to Ms Ormsby, I am going to point out, obviously, committee, no policy support for this. Planning Inspectorate, and I did ask earlier that very thing, Planning Inspectorate loves to say, yep, you've got animals, they are 24-hour care. Plants aren't. Even soft fruit isn't, generally. A chicken, yeah. If they're breeding chickens, I know, but are they breeding them and everything else in quantities that needs that sort of care? And the proof to say they need that sort of care. I'm giving you a highlight, that's all, because if you start to allow this type of thing, and it's not a bad thing, don't get me wrong, I fully understand what they're doing, but they are close to a community where there's homes very close that could be used. But nevertheless, all the farms throughout the country will be going, oh, wonderful. Suddenly in East Devon, I can have an agricultural workers dwelling on a temporary basis because East Devon now deems that a reasonable excuse. It's not about individual people. That's just my thoughts to make people think. Yes, Vice Chair.
Thank you. We go against our own standards here. If we allow this, it says that one of the reasons for refusal is that it's substantially below national described space standards. Now, we have refused applications before on those grounds. Yeah, I've every sympathy for the situation, for the workers who are needed there, but could they not be accommodated in something a little bit more spacious? I think that, you know, if we allow this, we're lowering our standard, and we shouldn't be doing that. We have to look after people as well as vegetables. So, as Chair has said, there are no policy grounds for supporting this. I'd love to be able to support it, but you know, we have these policies and we should be sticking with them, and I'm sure that Henry Gent will understand that. I'd like to see this application come back again in a different form, perhaps. But at the moment, I can't, for the reasons I've explained, I can't support it.
Officers.
So I think when we're looking at policy H4, so yes, there is in principle the potential to support rural workers' dwellings in the countryside. And we don't doubt the fact that you know, that there's a genuine farming operation going on the site, and that there's a need for labour to work on this farm. What we're having to assess is there an essential need for people to live, that functional need to live on the site, not to work on the site. That's a given that there's a labour requirement. There is a farmhouse at the moment with 3 farm partners there, so there is an on-site presence at the moment. So what we're having to look at is there a functional need to have a second farm workers dwelling on the site to give that 24/7 presence. Now, often that can be argued on large livestock enterprises where it's not reasonable when there's lambing and things going on during the night, and it's not reasonable to expect just one person in the main farmhouse to be constantly getting up in the middle of the night so that they can share those tasks. And whilst there may be, we have had some extreme weather conditions recently, but they are occasional. With arable horticulture, for the most part, you don't get those same middle of the night demands on a very regular basis that you would do with livestock farming. So that's part of what we've looked at. We've then also looked at, when you're proposing a temporary business, it's because you're testing out the viability of a relatively new farm enterprise. This farming enterprise, as we're told, has started in 2018, so that's actually already been going for 7 years. Ordinarily, you would be looking at this at the beginning of a new enterprise and be looking at 3 years as a reasonable test period. We haven't had a business plan, and I'm not saying that there isn't potentially one out there, but we haven't seen the business plan that justifies that shows that this is a viable business and that it will, even if it's not now, that it will be, and what the plans are to grow. We've just seen some very headline figures of, we anticipate our net income will have increased by this, this and this, but without the business plan to show how they're proposing to get there. For those 2 reasons, the officer view is it doesn't meet the tests of policy H4 to demonstrate, A, the functional need to live on site as a second farm workers dwelling, and then secondly, from the temporary nature of the building, we haven't seen a fully worked up business plan to demonstrate the justification for the temporary workers dwelling. So for those reasons, plus obviously there is the landscape harm. I mean, if all other matters were satisfied, it's part of the planning balance. It might weigh differently, but nevertheless, there is some landscape harm. And we're also the situation that the building is considerably below nationally described space standards. If this were not a retrospective application, we could possibly, have had discussions about that and amending a scheme, but it is retrospective. So we're just considering how the building is currently being delivered.
Thank you. Councillor Barlow again.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we approach each application on its own merits. That is a fact. I just want to clarify that if we were to posit, we do not set a precedent that anyone in East Devon can come along and put a farm in a caravan in its field at 23 square metres. So It's a 3-year temporary restriction on a mobile home, so there are no minimum. It is mobile. I've seen a picture of it being towed behind a car. So I've seen a picture of it in the pack somewhere or in the planning thing where it's being towed to go under a petrol station. So it is mobile, as far as I'm aware. And at the end of the day, if it is a mobile, there are no such things as minimum size standards on them. So again, much as it's if we were building a house, I was the one who started shouting about them right at the beginning 2 years ago. So I'm very happy that this doesn't apply with that. I just think at the end of the day, this is for 3 years. If we want to put a restriction on it that we want to see within a year, whatever the financial thing you want to do, which again, is just a piece of paper with a load of figures on it that will be made to look exactly what you want, then fine. Let's put that as one of the conditions on it. But I, for one, would like to support this, or feel that we should support this. Thank you.
And quite clearly, it doesn't meet the definition of a mobile home purely because of its height. That is a standard fact. So you can't consider it a mobile home.
I'm sorry, you can't deny that it is a mobile if it's been moved, but you're saying that because of its height.
It's got, yeah, two stories plus. Effectively, it falls out of that remit.
Is there a set remit for mobile homes then? Oh, right.
Sorry, so there's a definition of a caravan, which is, and mobile homes meet the definition, well, to be considered a mobile home, it would meet the definition of a caravan. And it's in the Caravan Act 1960, and it sets out the size, the length, the width, and the height, and that's to be defined as a caravan.
And what are they?
I can't recall, but I know we checked it, and it is, I think the maximum height is 2-point-something meters. So this exceeds it because of it's 2-story. Mobile homes are always single-story. That's the key difference.
Apart from my camper van that has 2 stories, but that's another story.
So it's not a mobile home. Can't consider it that. We have to consider it as a permanent home, even though it's only asking for 3-year structure. 3 years temporary accommodation. It is substandard in size. So, proposer and second, are you happy to stand with what you're doing?
Yes.
Okay. Right. Damien.
So we would just need to consider any necessary conditions, and I would assume that it would be, as it's already built, that it's to be, so the temporary 3-year condition, and only to be occupied by rural workers. Yes.
Conditions to be agreed with.
Yes,
with yourself,
we could. We were just thinking
and
that.
the ward member.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because there's a composting toilet that would also need looking at. Yeah. So my understanding is that it's recommended for approval on the basis that the proposer and seconder believe that it is in accordance with policy H4.
Correct.
And that there is not significant landscape harm, and that in this instance, because it's only a temporary dwelling, you feel it's less important about meeting nationally described space standards.
That is correct as well. Thank you.
Councillor Brown, before we do.
Right, I've just looked up the maximum size of a caravan that comes under the Caravan Act. 6.8 metres wide, 3.05 metres tall, and 20 metres long. So, yes, yeah. You're upsize of that, yeah.
Okay, well, we have a proposer and a seconder. You happy, Damien? Mr. Hunter?
Yep, so to
When-
allow in policy H4.
Can I just ask a
Yeah,
question?
so I've
then?
got that it's in line with policy H4 and that the wording of the conditions delegated back to officers in consultation with the chair and is it ward member as well? Yeah. Lovely, thank you.
I just want to obviously, some of the comments were made about D7 and providing a business plan. Is that conditioned as we're given an opportunity for them to do that as part of that, or are we just stepping around that for a second? Fine. If you think that's appropriate, yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, okay.
That's not a condition. You have to do that before. You'd have to refuse it to do that. And that's another reason why you shouldn't be approving it here today. We've got a proposer and a seconder. No other speakers. Can I please have a show of hands for this? That is overturning the officer's decision. 1, 2, 3, 4. And against, please. 3, 4.
There you go.
And I will cast my vote as I've just voted, refusal as per officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, no. Yeah.
Let's not get into that again.
No, I know.
Right,
Yeah.
that motion fails.
Now.
So now, do we have a motion for refusal in line with officer recommendation?
I will do that from the chair.
you.
Refusal as in line with officer's recommendation. Can I again have a show of hands for refusal?
Seconder.
No, don't need one from the chair.
No.
Can I please have a show of hands for refusal, please? 1, 2, 3, 4. And against? 1, 2, 3, 4. And I cast my vote for the refusal. Thank you.
Thank you.
And hand it back to the chair. To the chair, not me, chair. The chair.
I quite understand.
Right then. We have one more application then. Right, there are large numbers of people arriving for the afternoon. So
We're going home.
we will crack on. So, so agenda item 11, planning application 250724 LBC Church Cottage, Church Lane, Sidmouth, and that's pages 175 to 182 in your agenda pack. And so we have a conservation officer. This is a bit of a first, isn't it? Sarah Leet Groves, she's going to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. This listed building consent application is before committee today as the applicant is a serving councillor for East Devon District Council. The property we're dealing with is Church Cottage. It's a Kirklees listed heritage asset. And it's the works in a nutshell. It's various works. They were requesting the retention of retrospective works between the years 2013 and 2024. The site, if you can see it, possibly not, is located under those trees. It's on the periphery of Sidmouth Town Council, to the west of Old 4 Street. Town Council, the town, the core, yes. To the west of Old 4 Street. That's the property there. It's got nice space in comparison to the urban form of the town centre. That's it there. The historic character of this site is quite rich. This is our property here. We have a Grade 2 star, St Giles and St Nicholas Church, almshouses, several listed buildings in Old 4 Street. So it's quite a rich environment this property sits in. The reason it needs listed building consent, because in context of that historic character, the property is actually curtilage listed to the main chapel. Sorry, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. The cottage is curtilage listed to the main chapel. So it's listed by association. I'll do this in a nutshell for you because I know you've had a long morning. This is the building here, the front of the building and the rear. The significance of the building, it's believed to, the origins are believed to be 1631, but looking at the property now, it's clearly been rebuilt and refaced into the Victorian Gothic style to reflect that of the church itself. It was constructed originally in stone, later rendered with plaster and painted white. The roof was originally thatch, it's now slate. It has an extension to the rear, and this is it here at the back to the rear. And basically that's how the building is considered in terms of significance, and its setting contributes to that in terms of its location in context with the church. Several buildings, as suggested earlier, several works have been undertaken, which it's now been applied for the retention of these works as they retrospective. I think it's important at this stage to recognise that the curtilage listing has come on a long way, and the building the works have been carried out naively, not considering the building was listed. It's only come out recently that it's been officially identified as a listed building, a curtilage listed building. And in fairness to the applicant, that they did receive a letter to say it was considered not listed, but going through the test we have now, which have advanced since 1999, it is listed. Majority of the works are internal works, a lot of it as a result of a damp course inserted incorrectly in 2016 and rectifying the harm of that. A lot of the works we're happy with when considered against policy in terms of for the conservation, the long-term conservation of the listed building. The key concern was the replacement of UPVC windows, which I will come to part of the recommendation. Briefly, the windows are here, which are the key concerns. The rest of the works at ground floor are absolutely fine from a conservation perspective. Same at first floor, there was a removal of a partition, but that actually opens up the proportions of the room in a lot better way. And going on to, this is just an indication of some of the fabric inside of the building, just to give you an idea of what works have been going on. And in terms of representations, there were no representations received on the consultation, through the consultation process. The legislation adopted for the decision was national and local guidance, policies and guidance. And the recommendation, it was thought, as I've said earlier, that the internal works are in accordance with the conservation of the listed building. So we have suggested that they've resulted on some harm, but not enough to undermine the significance of the building. The key issue being the UPVC windows inserted at the rear. But given the history of the site and this work being carried out in good faith, a decision was made that in discussions with the applicant, that an informative is put on a recommendation for approval, that when the windows are to be replaced, these are done in double glazed timber windows, which are more traditional to the significance of the building. And that was it, light relief from this morning.
So that's not a condition, it's
It's an informative.
sort of bit like I get on my MOT test.
That's correct,
yeah.
yes.
Yes. Okay.
Advisory. Yes.
Well, not mine, the car, obviously. Right, any questions? Okay. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to recommend that we agree this as per officer recommendation and also send a letter to the church suggesting that they don't put Mike Goodman on as the applicant, because I'm sure this wouldn't have come to committee had he not been on there. Thank you.
Okay. Seconded, Mike?
Yeah, happy to second, Chair.
Yep. Okay, anybody wish to comment on this? There's not a lot to say, is there? Okay, all those in favour then? Yep. And so that's unanimous, so none against, no abstentions. Simon, I didn't ask if you had any declarations. Oh, fine. It all happens when I'm not here, doesn't it? I'll have to do it more often. I might do it for the first one this afternoon, actually. No, it blooming well isn't. What should we do? 2:30? 2:30, 40 minutes? Well, could we do it in 25 minutes? Have lunch? 20 past. 20 past. Okay, 20 past, half an hour. On your marks.
Yeah.
2:20, Wendy. Yep. Okay.